This is the age of dungeons where monster-filled pits have opened up all across the earth. Naturally, humanity was granted the power by creation itself to fight back against those monsters, but there are still 7 dungeons out there that they simply cannot conquer. Dungeons that humanity has yet to master, and they are known as the 7 Great Dungeons. Most notorious of all is the dungeon called the Ancient Core. This dungeon has 3 entrances, each guarded by a guardian. The red path on the left is protected by a tiny person named Renee. The main blue path in the middle is protected by a warrior named Patrick, and the black path on the right is known as the filthiest and dirtiest one of all. It is guarded by countless tentacles, an uncountable number, and the creature ruling this impregnable fortress. This intruder is a monster that has lived for 1,000 years, appearing on the very first page of Imperial mythology. It has a fancy name, the Devourer. That is all. Humanity currently knows about the Ancient Core dungeon through a certain book, but they have no idea, not in a million years, that the book itself was distributed by the dungeon master and his 2 subordinates with the sole purpose of luring adventurers in once they read it. They come here to throw their lives away and keep this dungeon running. After all, who would dare approach a dungeon with so many mysteries? We need to feed them a little information like this, so they think they know a lot about this dungeon. That way they'll swarm in here like moths to a flame, never knowing that more than half of that information is false. Truly, ever since this book was leaked, 74 adventurers have crawled in here, and of course not a single one made it back alive. It's a pity that most of their weapons were melted down by the 116 tentacles on the 3rd path, rendering them useless. If it were Renee would have been able to handle them without causing any damage at all. Renee felt incredibly regretful. After all, they only lure these adventurers here to scavenge their loot. I didn't think they'd all choose the 3rd path and end up having their gear ruined by the tentacles. Devourer, who had been in his ancient monster form the whole time, heard the maid speak, and his body began to change, eventually taking human form. Devourer's hand rested on Renee's head and gave it a gentle pat in encouragement. Yeah, if it were you, I'm sure you could do it. Sorry, but aren't we here for a meeting? Or are we just here to play around? This voice belonged to Patrick, the guardian of the 2nd gate. The awkward atmosphere when standing near these 2 is making my teeth hurt, and it's not just my teeth. My skull is hurting, too. Patrick's joke was so dry no one even bothered to laugh. Renee immediately guided the other 2 back to the main topic of today's meeting, the issue of the 116 tentacles. On the right gate, having been severely injured. Devourer let out a long yawn, showing little interest. Don't worry, the regeneration rate of the tentacles is top-notch. If the situation isn't good, we can just look after it for a short while and find another guardian. Boss, can you find 2 instead? I want to break 2. Patrick was extremely excited, but this request was immediately shot down by Devourer. Patrick is destined to be a slave to Devourer for his entire life. There's no escaping it. The problem here is that while the 116 tentacles are recovering, they have to reassign duties to protect all 3 paths. After all, news that the 3rd path is about to be conquered will spread quickly. Humanity will soon be sending new conquest teams to enter the dungeon through that path. Devourer thought for a moment, and decided on the following solution. Renee, who was guarding the left entrance, will now switch to the right entrance, while Patrick will take her place. If humanity realizes Renee has switched, they will redirect their forces to that area. If we do that, we'll be able to repel both waves of attacks. Devourer clapped his hands loudly, feeling his idea wasn't bad at all. Wait, boss, what do you plan to do if humans go into the middle entrance? After this question from Patrick, all 3 fell into deep thought. Devourer suddenly felt very embarrassed by his hole-filled plan. No choice then if that happens, just let them head straight to me. Patrick silently mocked his boss's terrible plan while Renee exclaimed that the plan was perfect. She really is such a die-hard fan she wouldn't change even if she were reincarnated. All right, it seems the issue is handled. Now we just need to decide what to do with that sword. Sword? What sword? The sword the leader of the conquest party was using. It is one of the 36 masterpieces of virtue. It's a pretty famous sword among humanity. Patrick rummaged through the pile of corpses for a while and pulled out a sharp sword, the same sword that Renee is using is also one of those 36 masterpieces. Devourer evaluated it for a moment. Indeed, this time, humanity really got their hands on a good weapon. And Patrick didn't know what to do with this thing. If he gave it to the monsters near the entrance, humans would quickly steal it back. And letting humanity get their hands on such a good weapon doesn't bode well for them at all. So Patrick cautiously held the sword out in front of Devourer. "You should take it, sir." "Patrick, you aren't using the sword, just take it." "What, sir?" Patrick thought he had misheard and had to ask twice to confirm it when Deaver actually gave him this. He laughed so hard it seemed to light up the whole world. "Ha! One of the 36 virtues of a masterpiece is finally mine. Could anything in the world be more joyful than this, since I've already given you that sword? You should tear up that resignation letter you've been hiding in your ribs, Patrick." Ever since receiving the sword, even a skeleton like Patrick seemed to brim with life. Besides that precious sword, there were other spoils. As usual, Devar ordered Renee to keep the valuable items while the useless gear would be used to bait the humans. However, there was a problem that troubled Renee. The monsters in the dungeon didn't really have a use for the magical equipment they captured from humans. So she suggested that Devar extract the mana stones from the gear and sell them. That way they could earn some money. "Oh, so it's been a while since we've done that, hasn't it? Should I go to the human village?" Both Renee and Patrick slammed the table and shouted, "Ha!" at the top of their lungs because Devar was incredibly clumsy at transforming into a human. Right at that moment, he was still exposing his tail, yet he was always so eager to go to the human village. So as usual, the task of posing as a normal human was assigned to Renee. However, her day didn't start off smoothly at all, as the mana stones she brought to the shop were refused by the shopkeeper. "Why?" Renee gritted her teeth, her expression incredibly hostile and annoyed. The shopkeeper pulled out a wizard's stone and introduced it as a B-rank mana stone, compared to the ones Renee had brought. It was much smaller, which was enough to show the difference in class between the two types of mana stones. "The stones you brought can't be used unless you reach the level of a royal wizard or a high wizard from the magic tower." The shopkeeper thought for a moment, then added, "Well, some jewelers who have contracts with the Imperial Palace or certain branches of the magic tower might be able to handle this." Renee began to consider it. The Imperial Palace in the capital was too far, and she didn't want to go to the magic tower at all. But for her master Devar, there wasn't anything Renee wouldn't do. So she gathered the pile of mana stones from the table and left. "Take care, kid," the shopkeeper called out. Just as she was saying goodbye, she saw a large mana stone left on the table, so he called out, "Hey, kid, you left a stone behind." "That's a tip. Thanks for the information, human." As Renee walked out the door, the shopkeeper kept watching her. "What a strange kid. She's a human too, isn't she?" Renee went straight to the nearest branch of the magic tower. Knowing she was there to sell mana stones, the guards there directly led her to the top floor where the head of this branch worked, a female wizard named Ramus Arm. The moment she saw her, Renee could sense a massive, incredibly impressive amount of mana. The two exchanged casual greetings. Renee introduced herself with a fake name. General Ramus had intended to ignore her, thinking she was just a child, but the guard mentioned she had come with a pile of mana stones. "You must be familiar with the reputation of the magic tower, so I hope what you've brought is high class enough to match our status." Ramus Arm's tone was very clear. She wouldn't accept low-level mana stones. Renee opened her bag and dumped her pile of stones right out. "See for yourself." The sparkling light of the mana stones left Ramus stunned. She couldn't help but realize that all of these stones were a rank. And there wasn't just one, but a whole pile. Where did a kid like Renee get this many stones? Looking closely at her, Ramus noticed she had silver hair. Coincidentally, this was the signature hair color of one of the 8 great noble families of the Empire. Therefore, Ramus secretly assumed that Renee was a young lady from that family who had run away from home and stolen the stones. She quickly dropped her haughty attitude from before and asked to buy the entire lot. The price Ramus offered was 50 gold pieces per stone, and for the special ones, she would pay 80 gold pieces. Renee recalled the shopkeeper's words earlier. He said a commoner had to save for 15 years just to buy one of these stones. And in the Empire, the average commoner family could save 10 gold pieces per year, so 15 years would be 150 gold pieces. Clearly, Ramus was lowballing her. "Human, if you try to mess with me, you're dead." Ramus was frightened by Renee's cold expression. She secretly calculated in her head. It seemed this kid knew more than she thought. Ramus hurriedly apologized. "Actually, our branch doesn't have enough money left to buy all of these stones." "Then buy as many as you can." Ramus's guard brought out a chest full of gold containing 2,000 gold pieces, but she still wanted to buy all the remaining mana stones. So, Ramis haggled to exchange items of equivalent value for the rest of the stones. "Are you sure about the value of those items?" Renee asked suspiciously. After all, the woman in front of her seemed quite cunning, and besides, they had to be easy to sell. "You can rest assured about that. Please follow me. I'll lead you to see the items." Ramis led Renee to the item vault. There were indeed countless precious things here, but none caught Renee's eye until Ramis stopped in front of a glowing red heart-shaped gemstone. This thing captured Renee's attention. "What is this?" "Oh, it's called the Heart of Love. It's said to be a treasure that can make love come true." Hearing about making love come true, Renee's eyes immediately lit up. Ramis continued to explain that if you pour your mana into this stone in front of the person you love, the spirit within the stone could bring eternal love to both of you. Renee heard this and didn't think twice. She decided she would take this, but Ramis hesitated at this moment. She held the Heart of Love in her hand, cradling it like a treasure. "I'm not sure about the other items, but getting this one is a bit difficult. Because it can even steal the Emperor's heart. It is a priceless treasure." Even so, Renee was determined to have it. She gritted her teeth and pulled something out of her bag that made Ramis even more stunned than the pile of A-rank mana stones. "How did you get your hands on this?" It's no wonder Ramis is so panicked, because the item Renee just pulled out is the precious sword she always carries, one of the 36 masterpieces of virtue. After Renee left, one of Ramis's guards approached her looking extremely anxious. "Guildmaster, did you really trade away the Ruby of Affection? So what, don't you know what that item is? If you let that girl go like this, she's definitely going to die. That naive, noble lady just traded her own body to get the item she wanted. Don't you worry, girl. That girl will die as soon as the curse is broken anyway. Her body will be like that too, so there won't be any evidence left." As expected, a seasoned merchant like Ramis is much more cunning. Meanwhile, Renee is walking away with the Ruby of Affection, completely unaware of the dangers awaiting her ahead. The next place she stops is the Castle of Tea. It's one of the 7 great dungeons, and the reason Renee came here was to get a haircut. "I'm sorry for showing up without notice. I owe you so much. You're always helping me." "Oh, neighbors should look out for each other, right? Besides, I just love seeing you look so pretty." The one cutting Renee's hair is a beautiful woman. She is actually the final boss of the Castle of Tea dungeon. Possessing a lovely name, Earthbest, she cuts Renee's hair while continuously praising her beauty. This is also the thing that Earthbest envies most about dwarves: a face that never ages. Earthbest is also very beautiful and youthful, but to achieve that, she has had to bathe in human blood, drink human blood, and use all sorts of cosmetics. That's why her villa looks so horrifying. "Lady Earthbest, how does Renee look now?" "Of course, you're the prettiest girl I've ever seen. I guarantee no one could ever reject this look of yours. By the way, why are you all dressed up, planning to go on a confession?" Earthbest was just teasing, but unexpectedly, it hit the nail on the head. Renee clutches the Ruby of Affection in her hand, flashing a smile as radiant and breezy as spring sunshine. "Yes, I'm going to confess." Earthbest freezes in shock for a few seconds. Renee has come here to get pretty many times, but this is the first time she's heard about her having a crush, and on top of that, she wants to confess. "So who is it? Is it Sir Devara?" Best freezes in shock again, her whole body trembling. Is this kid joking? How can someone sound so serious while joking? But Renee insists she is absolutely serious. At this, Earthbest is even more baffled, because in her impression, Devara is a huge, pitch-black monster with many eyes and, most importantly, very ugly. She doesn't know what on earth such a guy has that could make the lovely, cute Renee fall for him. "I like many things about him. He's strong. Strong, well, I suppose he is the strongest person in the world. But his laziness ruins everything." Renee doesn't deny those things, including the fact that Devara is terrifyingly huge, eats like a fleet, sleeps all day, and even snores. He's insensitive, and lately he's even gained weight, my God. But no matter what, you still like him, right? Yes, I like him a lot. Earthbest realizes this girl is hopelessly lovesick, so she doesn't try to advise her any further. She just sincerely hopes everything goes well for Renee. "You actually deserve someone much better than Devara. If he rejects you, just come here and let's talk some trash about him." "Thank you, Lady Earthbest." Renee clutches the Ruby of Affection in her hand, brimming with confidence about what's to come. "I will definitely succeed." At the same time, at the royal palace in the capital of Leah, a meeting is being held by the Dungeon Conquest Alliance. The main topic of the meeting concerns the fate of the conquest squad led by the hero, Bernus Tantus. The owner of one of the 36 masterpieces of virtue now lies in Patrick's hands. He is one who believes that Bern and his entire squad are dead, but some others strongly refute this opinion. Didn't you say they could easily wipe out those guards? Their bodies haven't been found yet, so how can you be sure they're dead? Sir Bern would never lose to those monsters. But in reality, the core of the ancient dungeon is not as complicated as everyone thinks. The conquest of it could happen within 1 or 2 days, or the adventurers who came here to conquer it could also be killed in the same amount of time. It's been 2 days since they last made contact with Bern. Even though they really don't want to admit it, the fact that Bern is dead is almost certain. Then what about his sword, one of the 36 masterpieces of virtue? The communication magic had been cut off since they approached the center of the ancient core, so, unless they could return from that place, retrieving that sword is impossible. The whole room falls into deep thought. 2 opposing opinions are put forward. One is to stop the dungeon conquest to preserve their forces. The second is not to give up, especially since Bern had fought to the death to reach deep into the center, so very likely the boss has been injured too. That's right, he is the hero Bern after all. That boss is definitely hurt, and the dungeon must be reorganized just like we discussed. Shouldn't we regroup and raid this place again before it has a chance to fully recover? But it's not that simple. The Dungeon Raid Alliance has already lost one of the Royal Kingdom's mightiest heroes, and that precious sword is gone too. Gone. Still, if we just sit around like this, the royal family will turn their blades toward us. And if we send the second team and they fail as well, then the leadership will definitely be ousted. Plus, there's no guarantee the boss has even been injured yet if the raid team hasn't been able to deal even the slightest bit of damage to the dungeon. Then what is the point of sending the second team out in the first place? Finally, the leader of the alliance reluctantly voiced his thoughts, raiding the ancient core is impossible. Just then, from behind him, a voice rang out. It was a young man laughing mockingly. How naive. Why would you think that? Personally, I think raiding that dungeon is easy. The person who just arrived is from the Royal Magic Research Association, which proves the royal family has started interfering in this matter. After this group appeared, the entire hall became incredibly tense. It was clear they didn't come with good intentions. The young man didn't hesitate to use the harshest words to blame the alliance, claiming their stupidity was the reason a great hero had to sacrifice his life. And they even lost one of the king's precious virtuous masterpieces to the enemy. But if we kill everyone here, then who will cooperate with the Empire's other raid teams? That is why His Majesty has offered a proposal so that you all may live. And that is to conquer the ancient core once again. It sounds easy, but everyone here has nowhere near the capabilities of Bernistan. If he couldn't do it, how could they, Nifrim? The young man said not too much, not too little. He dropped that one word and everyone started buzzing. What is Nifrim? If I'm not mistaken, that's a solution with a lot of defects, right? It is not a defective product. It is incredibly successful. Did Bernistan and his group fail to survive because they were weak? Or were they just careless? Obviously, it was neither. Then why? No one knew the answer. The atmosphere in the room was deathly silent. Because there is one thing that Bernistan and his team were missing, and that is Nifrim. Open your eyes and watch just how successful this raid will be. Meanwhile, Devourer deep in the dungeon sneezed so hard it felt like his soul left his body. Suddenly he had a bad feeling as if a huge storm were coming. Devourer sneezed again and directly transformed from his human form back to his original state. Damn it, did I catch a cold? Devourer really just wanted to flop down and rest, but out there humans could enter the dungeon again at any moment, so he was forced to patrol the entrance. If he was lazy, Patrick would definitely give him a beating, even though Devourer was the true master of this dungeon. But every time Patrick lost his temper, Devourer was still scared out of his mind. First, Devourer checked the tentacles that had been injured by the raid team. As expected, they were all suffering from fairly serious wounds. But even as the master of this place, Devourer couldn't personally interfere with the healing process. He drifted over to another room where the core was the body, the heart, and the brain of those tentacles. Even though they had been battered, as long as the core remained intact, the tentacles could still survive if they were provided with enough nutrients. Devourer saw for himself that the core of those tentacles was still doing just fine, and he finally breathed a sigh of relief. Now, he just had to wait for them to recover on their own. So the only problem was entrance number 3, where the injured tentacle mass was currently unguarded. Devourer planned to head back, report to Patrick, and go to sleep to get rid of this cold. He'd probably get nagged again, but oh well. He was used to it by now. Just as he turned around, a dagger flew from behind, grazed past Devourer, and embedded itself straight into the wall. "You trash human once you've set foot in here. I will make sure you don't return in one piece." Devourer's tail emerged. He had clearly entered combat-ready mode. But then, the owner of that voice spoke again. "Oh, it's you, my lord. I thought some devious human had managed to sneak in here. Turns out it's just Renee." He thought it was someone else. The girl apologized profusely, but what caught Devourer's attention was that she looked completely different from her usual self. He stared at Renee suspiciously. "Renee, are you all dressed up today? You noticed? I'm so happy, my lord. How does Renee look today?" He stared and stared. She looked like she was dressing up for a special occasion. Cold sweat ran down Devourer's face. Usually, Renee was so simple, always wearing her maid outfit. Dressing up like this today? Don't tell me she's planning to retire before Patrick even does. If she does that, I'll be left alone to handle this entire dungeon. I'm doomed. A special occasion, you ask? That's right. Renee twirled a long lock of her hair around her finger, acting all coquettish, while Devourer became increasingly tense. My lord, could you spare a little bit of your time for Renee? Devourer screamed internally. Anything, I'll do anything. Just don't quit your job and we're good. Renee led the overlord to a private spot she'd already set up with a table and chairs. She invited him to sit, then brought out some hot tea. Devar had absolutely no clue about the feelings hidden in Renee's heart. The only thought in his head was, don't quit, please don't quit. This place used to be a spot only he knew about, but now it will be a secret between the two of us, overlord. Oh, right. And Lord Devar, you've had Renee for 85 years now, haven't you? Do you even remember? Oh, this is bad. This is clearly a resignation letter. As the teacup touched his lips, Devar felt like freezing. He started reminiscing about the first time they met. It was 85 years ago when thousands of dungeons were being ravaged by the dungeon conquest fever. At that time, thousands upon thousands of people were trying to reach the ancient core. That was also when Renee earned her title and started climbing the ranks. Wasn't it? She must have gone through so much hardship. Now then, is your right eye feeling any better? You still remember my eyes? Of course, I've always remembered them. I've been so happy that I could stay by your side and protect you all this time. Hearing this, Devar literally froze. Been so happy. What does that mean? Isn't that what people usually say when they're saying goodbye? Does she mean she's not happy anymore and wants to quit? Devar frantically chanted in his mind like a broken record, don't quit, don't quit, don't quit. But what? Renee said next was the complete opposite of what he was thinking. Overlord, I like you. I like you, Renee repeated firmly, resolute. For 85 years she had been waiting for this moment. Devar's tail wagged uncontrollably, not out of joy but pure confusion. It was the first time someone had confessed to him, and it was his loyal guardian of 85 years, no less. What kind of awkward situation is this? Devar scratched his head, feeling embarrassed, not knowing where to begin. Renee, thank you for telling me that you like me. But we are always hanging on the edge of life and death. We never know when we might get hurt or lose our lives. I'm sure neither of us wants the other to have to live in loneliness, right? This was clearly a polite rejection. Renee gripped the hem of her clothes tightly. This answer was exactly what she had expected, but the feelings she had cherished for 85 years were just too deep. They were too heavy to keep locked in her heart, and when she finally heard the rejection from Devar in person, she still found it unbearable. Today, she had made up her mind. No matter what, she had to be loved by the Overlord. She already had that ruby of passion in her hand. Renee kicked the tea table over, shocking Devar. She wouldn't bow her head anymore. Now, Renee, calm down a bit. With this thing, my wish will be fulfilled, Overlord. Just pour your mana into this, and our love will be eternal. The gem in Renee's hand emitted a beautiful rosy light. But as soon as Devar saw it, his expression shifted drastically. The atmosphere around them changed in an instant. Devar slowly reverted into his true form, a hulking, coarse monster, ugly and savage. His fury engulfed the girl before him. Renee, were you planning to kill me just now? The ruby of passion in Renee's hand fell and shattered into pieces just like her heart at that moment. By the time Devar regained his senses, Patrick was already laughing at his face. The situation earlier had been so chaotic that he had lost his rationality. Devar only remembered Renee acting out of control coupled with that strange ruby. That sight made him think she was trying to harm him. Devar's body shifted into a half-human, half-demon state, scaring Renee so much she dropped the stone. She knelt before the Overlord. Her eyes couldn't leave the stone which she had traded her own weapon to get now shattered into pieces. That was when Patrick arrived just in time, but both Renee and Devar were losing control. There was no other way. He had to draw his sword and knock her away. Only by keeping that distance could he protect her from the Overlord, who was currently in a daze. "Patrick, do you want to kill me too?" Devar roared in a fit of rage. The memory ended there. Devar was currently clutching his head, feeling incredibly miserable. He didn't remember a thing, and he didn't understand why. He had behaved that way. Now what was he supposed to do? To reject a lady like that and so rudely? Renee is definitely going to be furious with him. I guess I have to go find her and apologize, right? What are you thinking asking me such an obvious question? There is no denying that Devar is one of the most powerful monsters out there, but perhaps in terms of social skills, he's worse than the worst. Even though he hurt Renee like that, just thinking about the fact that just showing up to apologize makes Devar waver. You should know how important she is to this dungeon. Patrick is right. From preparing meals and managing the diet for every monster in the dungeon to cleaning repairs, setting traps, and even recruiting new monsters. Handling monster complaints, selling supplies, and managing the budget. All that falls on Renee and Patrick. Honestly, losing Renee would be worse than the dungeon being destroyed. Yeah, I know that. Then you need to go find her before it's too late. Even if you have to beg on your knees or kiss her boots, you have to bring her back. Devar, your hands have been stained with the blood of many. You've never faced a challenge like this before, have you? But you can't keep avoiding Renee like this. Patrick, give him the bracelet called Demira. It can help stabilize mana. You don't need to know the details. Just know that it's extremely expensive. What Patrick means is, for heaven's sake, don't break it. The mana flow in Devar is so intense that if it's not controlled, it's easy to end up in that awful state from earlier. Even though he doesn't know if this thing will actually work on Devar, something is better than nothing, right? You're prepared to this extent. It's like you knew this would happen from the start. This is gross. Where did this bracelet come from? I picked it up off the floor, all right? After the two bickered for a while, Patrick didn't forget the main point. Devar only has 5 days round trip, because humans will be returning here soon. Without both Devar and Renee, it will be very difficult for me to stop all the intruders. I don't know what will happen if humans reach that place, boss. 5 days. I can guarantee that place will be safe for at least 5 days. Please keep that in mind. All right, I'll return to Renee within 5 days. After Devar left, Patrick let out a long sigh. The situation seemed even more troublesome than he had imagined. Patrick pulled a crumpled newspaper from his ribs. On it was information about a circular sword called the Decapitator, one of the 36 virtuous masterpieces currently up for auction. It looks like Renee sold it somewhere and bought back that pink gem containing a demon. That was exactly what made Devar lose control, but he can't let him know that Renee was tricked. Patrick could easily imagine the scene when Devar found out about that. That would be the end of the world. Patrick flipped the paper over and saw an even more shocking announcement. The Dungeon Conquest Union is confident that in this raid, they will reach the Relic Core within 3 days. Oh no, not now. Didn't I just promise the boss I'd protect this place for at least 5 days? Patrick felt like he'd been struck by lightning. Damn it, my miserable life. Right now, Devar is lying exhausted on the ground. This is already the second time he has randomly teleported to a location. But the problem is, I keep ending up in the middle of nowhere. Let's try one more time. In Devar's mind, a location appeared, the town of Hastin, where Renee had taken the mana stones to sell. The scene shifted to another place. Pathetic humans, you actually managed to climb all the way up here. I must grant you lowly creatures a favor. How about a glorious death? That's funny. A demon who's full of herself, huh? We are a seasoned conquest squad, ranked 32nd in the entire kingdom, the elite mercenaries of the Tiger God Legion. Remember that name, because soon we will be famous across the continent. It seems like a mercenary group has come to conquer an ancient castle, and the master of this castle is a beautiful demoness. She is the 17th descendant of the demon king Asmodeus Melgezalim Faria. Facing the impudent humans demanding her throne, Agria had absolutely no patience left. You have the honor of knowing my name. Now go die. The leader of the mercenary group didn't flinch at all in the face of her aura. He gripped his weapon and decisively charged at his opponent. Agria held her weapon spun in a circle and created a shield that blocked all the attacks from her opponents. At this moment, another guy in the team rushed up to assist. The more Agria looked at them, the more of an eyesore they became. Just a bunch of weak mercenaries and you dare to provoke me. You humans who don't know your place, I will turn you into ashes. A powerful purple mana stream representing Agria's power engulfed the entire room. It was like a raging fire. In the blink of an eye, it swallowed the mercenary squad. Desperate screams echoed, leaving only the captain. Agria raised her staff again, casting a new spell. A blast of ice formed and struck directly at the captain, but this guy was quite agile. In a flash, he was able to dodge it. You think I'll let you off, you witch? He grabbed a floor tile and threw it with all his might at his opponent. But this wasn't any kind of magical weapon. Generally, it couldn't hurt Agria. She cursed stupid and continued using her spell to condense ice bullets to fire at the captain. She thought it was all over right there. But just at that moment, a shield of Agria suddenly appeared above him. Wait, didn't her mana flames already finish off the mage in that group? Captain, charge. Turns out the mercenary's mage wasn't actually dead, though he was in pretty rough shape. Agria found that incredibly annoying. Ugh, I want to wipe these pests out quickly. Clenching her right hand into a fist, Agria and that captain simultaneously lunged at each other like two arrows fired from opposite directions at breakneck speed. A massive shockwave hit, shaking the whole room until it crumbled, sending debris flying everywhere. The captain and the succubus were both blasted backward, but both could feel something. The force that knocked them back didn't come from their opponent. Agria quickly realized a third party had appeared, and the captain was just as confused. He had received zero intelligence that any other raiding party would be coming here. Agria struggled to stand. She was genuinely starting to worry now. If this new group is even stronger and they're human, we're in big trouble. They'll breach the Demon King's fortress. Who the hell just dropped from the sky? Through the thick clouds of dust, a tall, lean figure slowly emerged. Hey, do you guys know which way to the town of Hastin? Both Agria and the mercenaries had the same look of utter disbelief on their faces. Some random guy suddenly dropped from the sky, hit them with a crushing blow, and then said, "What the hell?" Devarro lazily scratched his head. "Look, I'm just trying to ask for directions. I come in peace." His gaze fell on Agria. "Bring as many people as you want, you still can't take me down. Pretty girl, but you've got quite the temper, diva." R realized the female demon no succubus in front of him was a demon king. But Agria gave him a completely different vibe compared to the demon kings he'd met before. Devarro let out a long, weary sigh. Is this a generation gap thing? Am I really that old already? While he was lost in thought, the cursing started up again. You bastard! You're going to pay a heavy price for destroying my castle. Let me show you how we deal with trash like you. Just then, the mercenaries' reinforcements arrived. Bolstered in both strength and morale, the captain immediately ordered an attack, and a bloodthirsty Agria didn't hesitate to join in. In no time, the two sides were tearing into each other again. Devarro stood to the side, looking like he was invisible. Nobody even glanced his way. Seriously, nobody cared. Hey, wait, is your magic supposed to hurt? It doesn't do a thing. To us, you pathetic human. So talkative, huh? We've got backup now. Don't be afraid. All of you charge. Taste the pain, you lowlife. Devarro hadn't given up hope. Can anyone just tell me the way to Hastin Town? Of course, nobody bothered to pay him any attention. Rubble was raining down like a storm. Devarro sat in the middle of the wreckage, getting annoyed. He had to find Renee soon. Otherwise, Patrick would chew his head off. But Devarro had forgotten that he was terrible with directions. Even after teleporting countless times, he still hadn't reached that town, and this bunch busy. Fighting each other? Definitely weren't going to give him an answer. Devarro wearily stood up, about to leave. But then one of the mercenaries called out to him with a cocky attitude. Hey, you bastard! Why don't you get over here and help us out? Devarro was already at his limit. Hearing that, he just snapped. Shut up. A monster-like aura began to envelop his body, releasing a massive surge of mana. Devarro's mana carried a suffocating pressure, like darkness beginning to swallow the mercenaries in the room. The scene quickly turned into chaos. Piercing screams were the only thing that stuck in Agria's mind. By the time she regained her senses, the entire squad, those dozens of mercenaries, had already been completely swallowed by Devarro. He even let out a massive burp. That was amazing. You're so strong, you might even be stronger than me. Agria's eyes sparkled as she started trying to cozy up to Devarro. I'm really interested in you. I want to learn more about you. Devarro hadn't even had a chance to answer before Agria uncontrollably fired off a barrage of questions. What's your identity? What was that huge black thing that just appeared? Where did you hide it anyway? What's the secret to your power? Devarro made a face of pure disgust. Generation gaps really do cause so many issues. He hated kids, especially creatures, with pink hair and butterfly wings standing in front of him. Agria finally realized her rudeness. She quickly reined herself in and apologized to Devarro. Then she used the most flamboyant gesture possible. She introduced herself once again. Let me introduce myself, the famous, beautiful, and great Demon King, the 17th descendant of Asmodeus, and Melgazelim Faria. This showy behavior made Devarro despise her even more. But out of common courtesy, he should introduce himself, right? Devarro reluctantly wanted to give his name. But he quickly realized that wasn't a good idea. If he revealed his identity now, the news that the Ancient Core's master had left the dungeon would spread everywhere in no time. Patrick definitely wouldn't allow that. Devarro was afraid he'd get his head bitten off, so he decided to make up a fake name. Devar calls himself Swando Runier. In his mind, he imagines a guy with a sunny smile by that name, 32 years old and single, but the more he hears that name, the more cringy it sounds. Unfortunately, Devar's mind is completely blank right now. He can't think of anything better. Can we just call you Sir Swando? If that's what you want, sure. Fine then. Sir Swando, first of all, I'm incredibly grateful you saved me, even though it was a bit unnecessary. The kid is polite, all things considered. Except she's a bit eccentric and talks way too much. Devar loses his patience, waving his hand, telling her, "Hey, talk less." But Agria's mouth refuses to listen and keeps running at full capacity. No, without your help. I'm almost embarrassed to admit it. But if it weren't for you, I might have lost to their attack. So you saved me, but it's not like I needed you to save me. Note: the rest of the Little Demon King. Agria's 1,000-word speech has been omitted. Devar was already getting dizzy. Finally, they get to the point. Agria says that since he saved her, she wants to return the favor. Is there anything you want me to help with? Devar asks hurriedly, like a drowning man clutching at a straw. Do you know the way to Hastin Town? Aha, Hastin, you say. Seeing her reaction, Devar's heart blooms like a spring flower. If Agria can just tell him the way to that town, then Renee can go home. But life isn't a dream, because right after that, Agria pours a bucket of cold water on Devar. So what exactly is Hastin? The smile freezes on Devar's face. Damn it, this kid doesn't even know what Hastin Town is, let alone how to get there. What a waste of time. With no positive results to show for it, Devar secretly considers whether he should just swallow the brat whole. Fine, whatever. Then where is the nearest human village? In the end, Devar decides against eating her. She's a budding future of the demon world, so he'll let it slide. As it turns out, Agria knows this one, the nearest place is the city of Lisa. Devar is even more dizzy after hearing that. He's actually teleported near the royal capital. The important thing is, if you take a horse carriage, the trip from Hastin to Lisa takes about 2 months. Is something wrong? Sir Swando? Is there a problem? Too far. Devar officially collapses. Too far, I see. So you want to go somewhere far. How about using a teleportation wheel? What's that? You don't know. Devar really doesn't know. Agria is finally happy to find something she knows that Sir Swando doesn't, so she explains it joyfully. A teleportation wheel is something humans created using magic and alchemy. Currently, this device can transport people through space. As far as she knows, that thing is currently in the capital, Lias. Agria is so dedicated that she leads Devar all the way to Lias, even though he isn't sure if Renee even went to the capital. But finding any lead is better than nothing. Agria knows Devar is looking for a silver-haired girl and promises to help him with all her might. But aren't you the Demon King? What about your palace? Are you worried about me? Don't bother. Agria flashes a mischievous smile. I am the Demon King born in this ultimate body to rule. That palace doesn't matter because wherever I am, that is the demon realm. And all the demons around here are my soldiers. Devar thinks for a moment. In other words, this brat can summon demons at will. That is truly a formidable power. That's right, I can summon demons at will, but I've never actually tried it before. Sure enough, kids are just kids, not reliable at all. Agria sees the look of disdain on Devar's face, and quickly yells to justify herself. My father can do it, so I definitely can too. Besides, the palace was already wrecked by you anyway. It's impossible to stay there anymore, so me leaving the palace to wander with you isn't unreasonable. Enough small talk. Agria gets back to the main point. That is gathering information about Renee for Devar. Even so, he keeps having a gut feeling that hanging out with this brat will only lead to trouble. Why overthink it? Deal with things as they come. The first place. Agria leads Devar to turns out to be a tavern. Looking at the full beer mug in front of him, he officially confirms that his biggest problem right now is Agria.
I have a long way to go. Why waste time here?
Agria, having just lifted the beer mug and downed it in one gulp, lets out a long, satisfied sigh. It's been so long since I've had alcohol, this feels amazing.
It seems you don't understand the human world. A tavern is the best place to find useful information.
Seeing Devar looking at her with a suspicious gaze, Agria continues to explain. Just try looking around and listening. Every story is valuable information. You won't find that anywhere else. Devar looks around at all the drunks, but Agria is focused on something else, a bulletin board covered in scraps of paper. They contain all sorts of different information. Devar walks over to take a look. The first thing that catches his eye is a list of conquest parties operating in the dungeons. This information helps prevent multiple parties from entering the same dungeon at the same time, which would affect how the rewards are split. Agria holds humanity in deep contempt because she knows the larger the group, the higher the success rate. Yet driven by greed, humans choose to go in small numbers like moths, mindlessly throwing themselves into a raging fire. Whatever, it's a good thing for us anyway.
Wait, why us?
Agria quickly caught the oddity in Devara's slip of the tongue. Are you also a demon from the dungeon? Devara's heart skipped a beat, sweat pouring down his face. Damn it, why did this kid suddenly get so smart? Agria kept pestering him with questions, but he didn't want outsiders to know too much, so he brushed it off. Seeing that Devara was clearly not going to talk, Agria didn't push any further. Devara's eyes swept over the notice board and he stumbled upon another announcement. It was for his own dungeon. Luckily for the moment, the list of subjugation teams for this dungeon was empty. That meant they still had time to find Rhine. What are you looking at, sir? Just looking, just looking. Devara handed the paper he was reading to Agria. She let out an "oh," sounding quite intrigued by the ancient core. You know about this dungeon, too? Devara just asked a casual question, but he had accidentally triggered her talk mode switch. Agria rattled on and on about the ancient core, saying it was one of the 7 great dungeons, the dream of every demon, and that the one who rules this dungeon is the master of creation itself. The guardian of the gods, the punisher of those blinded by greed, the supreme being of all demons in this realm. Agria talked about Devar with eyes sparkling like stars, having no idea that the one she idolized was walking right beside her. Do you know, sir? The dungeon I've always dreamed of is that ancient core. I want to become stronger because if I get stronger, maybe in the future I can meet Lord Devar. Devara really wanted to tell her she was talking to that very guy, but of course he couldn't. He just had to make a few vague, supportive remarks to the kid. Next, Agria started talking about her father, saying he was very strong, a true demon king worthy of such a noble throne, but alas, humanity had someone even stronger. Asmodeus ended the life of that majestic demon king. It was a young hero named something like Burn. So he's the hero who defeated that demon king. I really don't want to meet him. Devara just played along with Agria. She surely wouldn't believe that the person sitting right in front of her was the one who had swallowed that young hero who once killed her father in a single yawn. The more Agria talked, the more pensive she became. She didn't want to spend her whole life managing a dungeon like her father wanted. Her true dream was to allow the demon world's citizens to build their own dungeons, and that was the motivation driving Agria to become even stronger. What do you think, sir? Isn't it wonderful? Wonderful! For the first time, Devara didn't find Agria annoying. Youth really is a wonderful thing, always full of dreams and ambitions. He thought back to his younger self. Just like Agria now, full of vitality and belief, Deverall once led a mighty army to conquer the continent. He strove to master all the knowledge in this world. Trying to learn more than anyone else, Deverall also helped the pitiful, because they moved his heart. Many times Devar gave them everything, but in the end, he realized everything was meaningless. Now Lord Devar's only goal was to sleep all day. A noble dream, huh? It's like me, and I'm sure it's like you too, Agria. After her speech, the alcohol finally hit, and she collapsed onto the table. A second later, she started snoring away. With no other choice, Devara had to rent a room and lug the kid upstairs. But because of that, he didn't notice that someone had gone to the information board to change the subjugation quest. This should have been posted yesterday, but the tavern owner had forgotten. And the content of the new notice was something Devara did not want to see at all. 7 Great Dungeons, Ancient Core. Subjugation teams participating the Fimo Guild. Fimo Zubeo line consisting of 31 members. Captain New Fimo. Time limit for subjugation 72 hours from the time of this notice. Early the next morning, Agria woke up feeling dizzy, her head throbbing like a hammer. Devara was also yawning his head off, but the moment he saw Agria, he was so shocked he fell backward. "Lord Swando, why are you so startled? Is my eyesight failing? Why do you look like a kid?" I'm not a kid. So like a teenager, then. Agria, too embarrassed to deal with it, went on the offensive and pounded his face with her fists. Devara didn't fight back because he was still stunned that just from sleeping one night, Agria had shrunk into a little child. But she kept punching, kicking, pulling his ears, and grabbing his hair, explaining that she hadn't shrunk at all. The appearance Devara saw yesterday was created using magic. Only that way, when facing humans, Agria wouldn't be looked down upon. Her current form was Agria's true self. It's a transformation spell. It allows the user to temporarily take on their future appearance. In other words, when I grow up, I'll be absolutely stunning. Just like the look you saw yesterday. Agria tilted her head back and laughed loudly. Devara was speechless. It seemed this kid wasn't just troublesome and fickle. She was also narcissistic. He sat on the ground to be eye level with Agria and seriously observed the child in front of him. "Are you clear on this yet?" "Lord Swando, I am not a kid." "Uh-huh," he replied with zero sincerity. "That's not important. What's important is that we have to go buy you new clothes first," Devara said wearily, because right now Agria looked like she was swimming in her parents' clothes. At the same time, in the territory of Count Haston, the subjugation team for the Ancient Core, having departed from the capital, had arrived. They demanded that the Count immediately open the city gates to welcome them. This made Itak the Count and Lord of the Haston region absolutely livid. By default, for dungeons above B rank any, incursion must have the permission of that region's lord. But this time, the subjugation team arrived without any prior notice and even demanded the lord personally come out to welcome them. This was clearly showing no respect for him at all, but most of them were members of the 3 guilds. This guild belonged to the royal family. The subjugation team this time was acting under the royal order, so no matter how angry he was, Itak couldn't do anything else. "You think that subjugation team, can this actually reach the heart of the ancient ruins?" The maid standing beside him listened to the question. She just stayed silent and shook her head. That was exactly what Lord Itak was thinking too. This expedition team only had 31 people led by someone named Nifrim, a name he'd never even heard of. Itak couldn't. Guess what the Three-Eyed Clan or the royal family was planning? But he worried that if they tried to conquer the ancient ruins in such a half-hearted way, Haston would soon fall into a major crisis. He started thinking about whether he should request a much stronger expedition team. His maid suggested the Wings Magic Tower. This was the branch that Rain had visited earlier to sell mana stones, but an outsider like. Itak couldn't possibly know that. He only knew that recently the Wings Magic Tower had been collecting a massive amount of high-grade mana stones of unknown origin. Even though he didn't know the deep-seated reason, Itak speculated that they were laying the groundwork for a dungeon conquest. After all, Wings was an A-rank magic tower. With that many high-quality mana stones conquering the ancient ruins was entirely possible. Thinking of this, Itak immediately made his own decision, send a commission to the Wings Magic Tower. Promise them plenty of money and fame, so go. Conquer the ancient ruins before those three-eyed fools can even set foot there. But that wasn't going to be so easy to pull off, because right after that, the door to Itak's office was kicked wide open. "Are you Lord Itak? Who are you?" "I'm Nifrim. Since you wouldn't open the gates despite us calling so many times, I took the liberty of letting myself in." Nifrim didn't show Itak any respect at all, simply sitting down on the nearby sofa. When the Lord demanded to know why they had come without permission, Nifrim immediately put on a terrifying expression. "Didn't you receive the documents from the royal family? So what? Is there some reason we aren't allowed to be here, huh? Hey Nifrim, what's with that look on your face? Smile, we're your guests after all. By the way, I want something sweet. Get me some chocolate." The blue-haired one seemed a bit more polite, but in reality he was also ordering Itak around. Even though he was furious, these were people sent directly by the royal family. so he couldn't touch them. Itak had to swallow his pride, send the maid to prepare the food as requested, and sit down across from the two of them. The documents only arrived here a day ago. You two are fast. When are you heading out? We were originally planning to go today, but something came up, so we'll leave tomorrow. Would that be all right? Itak wanted to stall for time so he could get the commission to the Wings Magic Tower, so he tried to bargain with Nifrim and his expedition team to stay for a few days until they were rested and in the right frame of mind. But Nifrim refused point blank. Look, if you don't care about us, that's fine. We'll just drop by the Wings Magic Tower and then leave right away. Why are you going there? Do you have acquaintances there or something? That's not the reason. I'm thinking of going there to wipe them all out, that's all. Nifrim's savage expression once again made Itak's skin crawl. He couldn't understand why the guy thought like that. As if reading the Lord's anxiety, Nifrim explained immediately that Haston was a place with very lax security. In a place like this, eavesdropping with magic was as easy as pie. The entire plan about inviting the Wings Magic Tower to get in the way of the three-eyed expedition team that Itak had calculated had been overheard by them entirely. We are under orders from the royal family to come to this borderland to conquer the dungeon. Do you really think we would just obediently give up? We will eliminate anyone who causes us trouble. I apologize. I won't ask for any other expedition teams. Please depart whenever you wish. Under Nifrim's pressure, Lord Itak had to concede. This bastard was clearly human, yet his presence was as terrifying as a demon. Patrick, meanwhile, was in the dungeon training his arm strength with some clay mannequins. With the keen intuition of a veteran soldier, he could tell that the time for the enemy to strike was very close. Over on this side. Following Agria's guidance, Devar finally made it to the city gates. He told the guards he wanted to use the teleportation wheel, but the guard replied that it was still very far away. Specifically, it was at the citadel to the right of the royal palace, and to get there, Devar would have to pass through 3 more layers of city walls. How long will it take to get there? Devar asked suspiciously, because just hearing that made him feel like something was wrong. Let's see. If you walk, it'll probably take a week at least. A week! Devar practically screamed, startling the guard. This isn't good. If things continue like this, not only will I not be able to find... With Rena gone and Patrick running away too, Devara felt like he was falling into a bottomless pit of despair. Agria suggested they use a levitation spell, but that wasn't feasible at all, because using mana to cast spells would get them detected by humans. Plus, Devara's mana levels are so high that if he released them without control, it would be a total catastrophe. Just as Devara and Agria were racking their brains, a savior appeared. Are you two in some kind of trouble? Sorry for eavesdropping, but it looks like you're trying to get to the teleportation gate, right? Yes, but who are you? The old carriage driver pointed to the carriage behind him. It was being pulled by a strange-looking creature. It had wings on its back. He introduced it as a 4th-generation homunculus, the result of an artificial angel production project launched by the Empire. Even though it looks a bit creepy, this creature is very strong, obedient, and most importantly, it knows how to fly. Too bad it was scrapped because it couldn't achieve the original goal of destroying churches. So the human homunculus experiments are finished, Agria wondered. Not a chance. This empire would never give up such power, but that's not important right now. Agria inspected the carriage for a moment. It looked really sturdy. The old driver then explained that if they traveled by this vehicle, it would only take 3 hours to reach the teleportation gate, plus 1 hour for customs for a total of 4 hours, and the cost would be 8 gold house coins for the trip. Devara's jaw dropped when he heard that. 8 gold house coins meant 800 silver house coins. Yesterday, they only spent 8 silver house coins to stay at the tavern. This was a complete ripoff. I'm sorry, sir, we don't have that much money. Agria looked confused, thinking, do you think I have that kind of money? Devara started scratching his head again. Meanwhile, he accidentally touched a bundle in his bag. He opened it to find a note Patrick had left. To my clumsy boss, there will come a time when you have to be grateful to me. Patrick. It came with some gold coins. Thanks to that, their trip could finally set off. Sitting on the flying carriage, Agria began to wonder who gave Devara so much money. A subordinate from my secret dungeon. Oh, right, you really are a dungeon monster, aren't you? So why are you wandering around? I got kicked out, okay? Devara didn't want to explain too much, so he made up a random excuse to satisfy the girl's curiosity. So, your subordinate got kicked out just like you. That's right? Devara got annoyed. Why are you asking so many questions? I'm jealous, really. Even after being exiled, you still have a subordinate who looks after you so well. I wish I had a companion like that. I want to live a life like yours. Like, you have someone who cares about you and you take care of them. What could be happier than that? Agria turned serious, and her quiet tone made Devara ponder as well. A few hours later, they arrived at the Axle station, but one disaster followed another. It was forced to stop operating to ensure safety for an auction. And it won't be back in operation until 8 o'clock. If you're interested, you can join our auction. The receptionist handed Devara a flyer containing information about the event. It was being held with a single auction item, the Decapitator, one of the 36 newly discovered masterpieces of virtue. Devara felt like he had been struck by lightning. This was Renee's weapon, there was no mistake. In this world, there was only one such unique weapon. So why was it in the hands of humanity? Could it be that Renee had met with a mishap? Devara felt it was absolutely absurd. Renee was very strong. Even the bosses of the other 7 great dungeons had to be wary of her. It wasn't for nothing that Renee was known as the sword-wielding maid. So how could humanity possibly threaten her life and steal the Decapitator? Devara started recalling the last time he saw Renee. Her outfit at the time seemed to have no room left to hide weapons, so when she fought humanity, was she really okay? Renee was different from Patrick. Even without a sword, Patrick could still handle himself. It's just that Patrick is even stronger when using a sword, but Renee isn't like that. If the sword-wielding maid was stripped of her weapon, what would she have left? The more he thought, the more chaotic Devara's mind became. Agria was panicked now, too, because Devara's expression looked terrible. Devara clenched his fists, his body starting to change, and the mana flowing within him became unstable and gradually lost control. So Renee, my subordinate, has been slaughtered by those low-class inferior humans. Devara's transformation process scared the receptionist, making him fall backward. He couldn't hide his terror, constantly screaming, "Stay away from me, you monster!" But Devara didn't care at all, for at this point, the little bit of reason he had left wasn't enough to control his body or that surging torrent of mana anymore. Only one thought filled his mind: if Renee had been murdered by those pathetic humans, then slaughtering every single one of those bastards here was only natural. Lord Swando, please calm down, snap out of it. What the hell is happening? Answer me. Devar turned and shot her a look of pure contempt. I'll say this only once: the head cleaver, one of the 36 masterpieces. Virtue is one of a kind, a unique treasure in this entire world, isn't that right? From what I know, that is correct. Then why would you even ask that? Because I've been searching for it for such a long time. It belongs to a friend of mine, and I must find it. You don't need to help me anymore. Thanks for the journey so far. Devar brutally shoved Agria's hand away. The last shred of his sanity told him he shouldn't hurt this girl. Now that he knew the way to Hostin, Devar sincerely advised Agria to stay as far away from him as possible from this moment on. But Agria wasn't the kind of child who listened to orders. Lord Swando, is that the friend you were talking about? A demon in the form of a silver-haired woman, a warrior who wields the head cleaver, a maid who uses a sword, Lady Renee, is that it? Dever didn't think this kid would suddenly be so sharp. Out of nowhere. But he didn't want Agria to get too involved in his affairs, though glaring at her or using that terrifying tone of voice didn't work on her anymore. Because Agria already knew Devar's true identity. After all, Renee's reputation was huge. If Devar himself had confirmed Renee was his friend, then figuring out he was the master of the ancient core wasn't hard at all. Fine, I am Devar, he admitted, but that sentence didn't even reach Agria's ears. Lord Swando, you are definitely a subordinate of the ancient core Master Devar, right? Is this kid a natural-born idiot, or did she train for it? Devar sighed in deep frustration, letting it go, not bothering to explain or refute her any further. I don't know what dangerous thoughts you're having. But I'm going to help you, and you aren't allowed to refuse. Don't worry from now on. I'm here to assist you. Devar suddenly realized that besides being a bit eccentric, she was actually pretty reliable. And so the next day at the auction, Agria appeared in a look Devar hadn't seen before. She even tried to dress up, and spent time on her makeup to look more like a noble lady. Agria and Devar went to the back entrance of the auction house. It was deserted. There was only one guard at the gate because all the invited guests were using the main entrance. We're here to attend the auction. Can we enter through here? Yes, this way, please. But first I need both of your identities. What are your names? I am Agria from the Mel's family, and this is Swando, my servant. The guard checked the guest list but couldn't find her name, which was to be expected. However, Agria wasn't nervous at all. She feigned ignorance and asked Devar if he had brought the invitation. And while the guard was still confused about why no invitations had been sent out for this auction, Devar delivered a massive punch. "Here's your invitation, an invitation to the afterlife." After dealing with the guard, Devar turned on Agria with irritation because after seeing her childlike demeanor, he really didn't like this grown-up glamorous look on her. "You're a child, don't dress like this." "I'll say this one last time, I am not a child." "Ugh, whatever, let's go." "Take that back right now." At the same time, the Renee that Devar had been struggling to find was hiding in another dungeon, none other than the Che Castle. She lay collapsed on the bed, tears streaming down her face. Renee could never return to the ancient core again. The scene from 85 years ago replayed in Renee's memory the moment the Grabinia forest was burned down by humans. This place was protected by a spirit named Grabinia. She was nicknamed the Witch of the Earth. The ancient core dungeon used this forest as its natural fortress, so Devar at that time punished those who burned the woods with a brutal massacre. It was also the first time he met Renee. She had been captured by humans and locked in a cell even though she had nothing to do with the forest burning. But he was drawn to the tiny person locked away in that dark dungeon. Renee was incredibly small and pitiful back then. Given Devar's nature, he should have killed her too so as not to leave any witnesses to the massacre, but that day, for some reason, Devar only used his power to smash the cell open. "You're free now. Go wherever you want. However, I won't help you escape this place. If you want to die from being trapped here, or if you want to get out, decide for yourself." Devar was searching for a maid named Leolao, and since there seemed to be no one else around but Renee, Devar assumed she was that person. After breaking the cell door, he left immediately. After all, Devar's curiosity-driven mercy only went that far. Only Renee remained sitting there in a daze. Leolao was the name of a maid serving the head of the house and also a title for the most talented maid. The Leolao that Devar was looking for was a head maid, while this tiny girl had never been called or referred to by that name, because an item like her had no name. But because of the events of that day, a seed was planted in Renee's heart, which over time began to take root and sprout. Right now, she's still completely dazed, hiding away in the Earthbet castle. Earthbet really wants to persuade her, but Renee is dead set on refusing to go back to the Hellcore. Earthbet doesn't want to force her at all. It's just that she knows with Deverall and Patrick's personalities, they are definitely searching everywhere for Renee. If they find out she was deceived by humans and ended up like this, a bloody revenge is bound to happen. If she's just going to live like a ghost, she needs to erase all her tracks. It doesn't have to be perfect. Being a little clumsy is fine, too. Patrick will understand her intentions and handle the rest. Osbeck also revealed that Nifrim's conquest squad is coming, and the Great Corps will be busy for a few days dealing with them. Hearing this, Renee unconsciously curled her hand into a fist. "Lady Earthbet, Renee intends to go somewhere very far away to get some fresh air." Earthbet wants to stop her. Because she sees that Renee's right eye is getting blurry, she isn't really comfortable letting her go alone. But Renee firmly insists she's fine and just wants to retrieve her sword before leaving. Meanwhile, after getting into the auction, Deverall continues to use force on the guards to interrogate them about the decapitating claw. He finds out this weapon was sent from the Magic Wing Tower in Haston Town. After getting the info he needed, Deverall temporarily spares the guy and leaves with Agria. "Damn it, that bastard almost killed me. I'm just a guard. What did I do wrong? Go to hell." The guard thinks Deverall has already left, so he mutters an insult under his breath. Unexpectedly, just a moment later, he appears right behind him like the Grim Reaper. "That's right, you didn't do anything wrong. You were just unlucky enough to accidentally annoy me, that's all." Deverall's body starts to transform and a terrifying mana aura radiates out. Only then does the guy realize he's a monster, but it's too late. Deverall has always despised humans. They call slaughter by fancy names like conquest or subjugation, then use the name of justice to swarm into dungeons, killing without feeling any guilt for innocent creatures. Did they do anything wrong to deserve being killed? No. It's the same for me. Because you are human, my enemy, that is the reason why I do this. As for the fate of that guard, I probably don't need to say it, everyone already knows. At this same moment in the auction hall, someone has already bid 35 billion gold, and it quickly jumps up to 70 billion. This time, Gwyn and Gazo, the commander and vice commander of the Black Tiger Legion, are in charge of security. Seeing that the auction has gone very smoothly from start to finish, the two are planning to go grab something to eat. But unexpectedly, a crisis strikes immediately. That is when the auctioneer announces he is presenting the third item to conclude the auction. Suddenly, a bunch of tentacles erupt from behind him and wrap tightly around him. Who said that I am the one who will end this auction? Both Gwyn and Gazo are scared out of their wits by this sudden situation. On the stage, Deverall has appeared in a terrifying half-human, half-demon form. You are all here to buy the decapitating claw, aren't you? Gwyn is one of the 3 heroes of the Empire, along with Byrne and one other person. But after the first Hellcore conquest, Byrne sacrificed himself. The public condemned it heavily because, after all, this was a conquest, carried out for personal motives. This condemnation inadvertently created immense pressure on the remaining 2 heroes. Even so, Gwyn has always tried her best to protect the people, dedicated to the nation. So the moment she saw Deverall kill that auctioneer, she wanted to rush in and fight immediately. Gazo, being more level-headed at this moment, hurriedly stops Gwyn. Perhaps Gwyn is too impatient and doesn't know how to gauge the opponent's danger level, but Gazo has already seen it. The existence of the one on that stage goes far beyond what is called dangerous. That is clearly destruction. If Gwyn rushes in now, it's a death sentence. Deverall moves closer to the decapitating claw. Although he doesn't want to admit it, this thing radiates the intense aura of its owner, so it is clearly not a fake. Deverall becomes even more certain that Renee was attacked by humans and robbed of her weapon. I'm very sorry, but this item actually already has an owner, so I will return it to its master. Saying sorry like that, but Deverall doesn't have a shred of sincerity. He even carries a sense of killing intent. The guests attending the auction couldn't help but feel this murderous aura, so they are both terrified and panicked, constantly screaming for the guards to stop Deverall. I will tear you all to pieces and bury your corpses along with this blade, Deverall growls out every word of his threat. And this isn't just a simple threat. He truly wants to bury this entire hall along with Renee. Do you think I'll let you do that? Leaping from the middle of the crowded people, Gwyn uses the fastest speed possible to charge straight at Deverall. She silently evaluates her opponent, fast as a squirrel indeed. Smooth movements with great combat gear, but it's a pity you don't have exceptional talent. The proof is that Deverall just stands there, but Gwyn still can't land a precise hit to attack him. Furthermore, she has no other weapon besides those gloves. A cruel thought crosses Deverall's mind. In this case, I should rip your hands off, then crush them into tiny pieces, shouldn't I? Although, to be honest, Deverall still rates this person quite highly. At least compared to the hero Byrne, she is not inferior at all. Gwyn uses her signature crushing move, channeling all her strength into a punch. Deverall reaches out his bare hand to block. As a result, the moment his hand collided with those rigid gloves, he was sent flying. The scene becomes chaotic with stone and debris flying everywhere. Gwyn waits extremely tense. Too bad Devar didn't die after all. Ha! So it turns out you're not exactly human, are you? The moment he spoke, the hair on Gwyn's neck stood straight up. The crushing move she just used was a finishing blow that wiped out an entire dungeon boss without leaving a trace. Even the armored clone, supposed to withstand 3 direct hits of any kind, was obliterated by that single skill. Yet Devar survived, and he's still looking perfectly fine. Gwyn stared intently at her opponent, taking in his ferocious expression. The extra eyes sprouting from his cheeks and the black aura swirling around his body. He didn't look human from any angle. She had suspected it from the start, but now she truly felt it. Devar wasn't just some ordinary monster. What the hell kind of freak is he? Gwyn was on edge, her eyes locked on every single movement the enemy made. Devar stood up, his teeth grinding together harshly. Then the 2 eyes on the left side of his face began to glow. At the same time, a savage, malicious grin spread across his face. What a pity, really. Dark energy flooded the space. Gwyn stood frozen like a statue, not because she didn't realize what was happening, but because the pressure radiating from Diva was just too overwhelming. It left her momentarily paralyzed, not knowing what to do. Just then, Gazo came sprinting from afar like a madman, eyes filled with despair. Damn it, don't come any closer, stay away from us. The surroundings fell into a dead silence. Lord Swando, are you all right? Agria's voice snapped Deverall back to reality. She had been incredibly worried, fearing that Deverall hadn't survived Gwyn's attack. The situation just moments ago had been pure chaos. Even he didn't understand how he was still in one piece, as Gwyn's technique clearly wasn't something a normal human could ever unleash. It felt as if it had struck directly at Diva's heart. It was even powerful enough to force him to reveal his true form. That was the worst-case scenario. Just imagining the look on Patrick's face if he found out about Devar. Being exposed like that was enough to make him feel the pressure of death. But luckily that didn't happen. Moments ago, Devar had been so focused on taking Gwyn's life that he didn't notice Gazot. She was the one who had evacuated all the guests in the auction hall. And in that final second, Gazot had cast multiple protection spells on Gwyn, successfully pulling her out of the attack that Devar was about to unleash. Deverall would never forget those two faces. He let out a mocking laugh. "You two are interesting." Gazot used a teleportation spell to get Gwyn out. The two of them crashed onto the middle of the street with a rather rough landing. Passers-by saw Gwyn and hurriedly gathered around. Her injuries were quite severe, so they frantically shouted for a healer. Gwyn struggled to sit up with everyone's help. Never before had she felt this humiliated. She was a hero of the Empire, yet she had been defeated by some nameless monster with just a single strike. If Gwyn had known who defeated her, the master of the Hell Corps, she probably wouldn't have been so devastated. But she didn't know. She just thought Deverall was some small-time nobody, so she felt extremely bitter. Gwyn's head was pounding like a hammer. The next thought that crossed her mind was, is everyone in the auction room still safe? And what about Gazot? Gazot! Gazot, where are you? Gwyn looked around in confusion, calling out softly, "How could I hear you if you call like that?" Gwyn silently thanked heaven. Gazot was safe and standing right before her. If it weren't for Gazot, today would probably be the anniversary of Gwyn's death. But very quickly Gwyn realized something was wrong. If you looked closely, you could see that Gazot's entire right arm had been severed and it was currently temporarily bandaged, but blood was still gushing out. "Gazot, your arm." "Don't worry, my life isn't in danger." Gwyn hugged her comrade and burst into tears. In that moment, she felt like the most failed hero of the Empire, unable to stop the monster and even causing her comrade to become disabled. "Gazot, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Gwyn kept apologizing, unable to stop her sobbing. Gwyn Historia. Conversely, Gazot was incredibly firm as she called her commander's name. "Calm down, you're a hero of the Empire, aren't you? If a hero cries their eyes out like this, are they worthy of being praised by everyone?" Then Gazot lowered her voice to soothe Gwyn like a child, using her remaining arm to wipe the tears from her face. Perhaps Gwyn didn't realize it, but Gazot did. The thing they had just faced was the master of the ancient dungeon core. Diva, wasn't it? "What are you talking about? Don't joke around. There's no way a monster like that could appear here." Gwyn felt like she had just heard the most ridiculous and boring joke in the world. "I don't know the reason, but I'm certain he really is, Deva. That dark evil calamity. That is the monster of the great Diva." The reason Gazot was so sure was because during the fight, she noticed the mark of the hero burn still remained on the opponent's leg. Moreover, the mark was very fresh, likely from less than a month ago. And the only monster who had met the hero burn and survived was none other than Deverall. "This is more serious than we thought, Gwyn. If this continues, the Empire will collapse. If it really is Diva, shouldn't we stop him even more? This is human territory, we have the upper hand." But Gazot didn't think that was a smart decision. Deverall was an existence that possessed power beyond human imagination. And it certainly wasn't something that could be solved by Gwyn's or Gazot's strength. Even the two of them combined wouldn't do a thing just like before. Gazot believed that they couldn't defeat Diva right now, so the only way was to return to the Demon Hunting Alliance to ask for their support and report it to the royal family. "So I will act alone first, but in my current state I can't teleport both of us. So Gwyn, stay here, okay?" Having said that, Gazot immediately used her healing power to soothe Gwyn's wounds. However, it couldn't fully heal her, so before disappearing, and she didn't forget to tell Gwyn not to wander off and to wait for her there. As for Deverall, he was still very conflicted between two options. One was to let those two escape and head straight to Haston, or to pursue and eliminate everyone to avoid the risk of his true identity being discovered. Deverall had such a headache that he kept pacing back and forth, much to Agria's confusion, but after some consideration, he finally made his decision. Regardless, he was safe now, and his claws and head had been recovered. The main purpose of this trip was still to search for. Renee shouldn't waste any more time, even though there's no telling what state she's in now. But Devara is determined. Even if Renee has been murdered, he must find her body at any cost. "Get ready, Agria." "What's wrong?" Devara noticed Agria looking restless. My lord,
About that, Swando? Even though I witnessed your power at the Demon King's castle after seeing this, you seem way stronger than I imagined. Even though you say you're Renee's friend, you seem even stronger than she is. Who on earth are you? Truly, you can't get any more oblivious than this. Even Gazo figured out Devara's identity, yet Agria, who's been glued to his side these past few days, still has no clue. Devara flicked Agria on the forehead. You brat, you really are a handful. He promised that once everything is settled, he'll tell her the whole truth. Now let's get this over with. Show them the power of a demon king. Agria nodded, then transformed into that initial form again with butterfly wings and demonic horns. In her hand, she held a glowing scepter. Restructure. Agria raised her scepter high. A purple light carrying a surging river of mana flowed upward into the sky. A massive explosion followed its tremors, spreading across the entire city. Fire and smoke filled the air. The citizens began to panic, unsure of what had just happened. This commotion also caught Gwyn's attention. She quickly realized the explosion came from the direction of the auction house. Damn it! Attacking in the heart of the capital, do those damn monsters have any regard for how many people are in the city? Gwyn stumbled to her feet. She wanted to do something, but she suddenly remembered Gazo's warning from earlier. She must not wander off no matter what happens and must wait until he returns. Gwyn's inner conflict was intense. Just then a small hand gripped her arm. Gwyn looked down to see a child. Sister, my dad is in that direction. Gwyn gritted her teeth. In that moment she made up her mind. She is the hero Gwyn Historia, and she won't hide from a monster like that no matter the cost. Meanwhile, Devara was struggling to climb out of the ruins. Damn it! He had told Agria to wipe out all traces of them at the auction house. Instead, she used high-level, wide-area restructure magic, causing a massive explosion. Then she made the entire ground collapse, burying everything. Everything is settled now, right? It's all gone. Agria smiled brightly. Hey, that magic really shouldn't have been used here. Could you stop interfering with how I do things? The goal was achieved, wasn't it? I finished them all off. It's all over neat and tidy. What else do you want from me now, Devara? Devara was speechless. It was indeed thorough, but the aftermath was way too huge. He wanted a clean getaway, but Agria was being as loud as a siren, basically saying, "Here I am." It really was a mistake to entrust important tasks to this kid. But what's done is done. Now another mess of trouble is about to head their way. Do you still remember the way to the center where the teleport gate is? Got it. I remember that place. Devara was desperate to get to Haston immediately, but it was too late. Surely the heroes or guards or whoever would be swarming in any second. Just when things were at a boiling point, Agria started asking questions about irrelevant things again. From the very beginning, she knew Devara wanted to go to Haston, but Agria still didn't know where Haston was. Don't you know where the ancient core is? Yes, I know. It's one of the 7 great dungeons I admire most. Well, the town is right nearby. Devara gave Agria a mission to go to the teleport gate and defend it first. After he finished everything here, Devara would meet her there because the humans had already gathered in a mob to block his path. Leading them was the Blue Crane Subjugation Squad, one of the 9 great aristocratic families of the Empire. The leader, a one-eyed man, demanded after introducing himself, "Devara, reveal your name." Devara observed the opponent with his sleepy eyes. There's so many of them. Humans always have to work in groups. He didn't understand why they were so stubborn. It's such a pain when humans gather like this. Especially since they've all been trained with enough skills for monster subjugation. It's fortunate there aren't any heroes like Byrne or Gwyn here. Devara thought to himself, I'll be done with these small fries. Maybe I won't even waste much time cleaning them up. You want to know who I am? Let me think if I should tell you. Devara flipped his right wrist and mana began to flow out like a spring. I am your enemy. At the same time, at the ancient core, the subjugation squad, led by Sony Frame, had already started entering. Sylvia, Nefrim's close aide, just noticed something strange. When the squad entered the first room, it was full of filthy, slimy monster carcasses, but the second room they stepped into was way too clean. It's like someone already cleaned this place up. What do you all think about this? The other team members started to wonder too. They all felt this was pretty hard to wrap their heads around. There's no way the Bernhistan army would be bored enough to come here just to fight. And actually, cleaning up normal monsters aren't nearly smart enough to do something like that. Or maybe a high-intelligence monster did it. Wait, didn't the Bern army already destroy up to the 5th room on this third path? That means the only place left is the boss room, right?
No way a monster would clean this whole place up. What are you talking about? If it was cleaning, why didn't it clear the bodies in the first room instead of cleaning here? Nifrim snapped at him. He noticed his subordinates were starting to panic. This wasn't a trap, just a place meant to rattle the troops. He waved his arms in the air, shouting as if he were losing his mind. Monsters, stop playing games. Are you trying to trick us? Nifrim's only answer was the endless echo of his own voice in the cave. A long while later, a new voice suddenly cut in. You guys are way too noisy. It's exhausting me and my joints are aching even more. I wasn't trying to trick you, I just cleaned this place because it was such a mess. I knew people would be coming here eventually. Conquering the dungeon, are you? But you're even noisier than I imagined. How annoying. A pair of glowing eyes appeared at the end of the corridor. Nifrim immediately went on high alert, ordering Sylvia to cast a spell. She raised her hand and a brilliant fireball flew toward the end of the tunnel. Finally, they could clearly see what the creature was. Too bright. You idiots, why do you keep throwing your lives away coming here? Nifrim gritted his teeth. He immediately recognized the opponent as the knight Patrick. The man had actually prepared a grand introduction for himself. But it seems Patrick's reputation wasn't bad since these humans recognized him the moment they saw him. Patrick spoke in a leisurely tone, laced with a hint of sarcasm, and began ordering the others around. Calm down, don't be so tense. Lower your weapons and let's talk this over. As for the little mage, don't keep your guard up like that. And you soldiers back off a bit. I don't like crowds. Before Patrick could even finish, a whistling wind echoed through the space. That was Johnny, who had just used his full speed to dash forward, tearing through the air with his dagger to strike at Patrick. Patrick gently raised his hand to block. How rude, attacking without even a proper greeting. Quit talking, go to hell! Nifrim roared. Then, he used an ice skill, creating a giant wave that crashed straight toward Patrick. They started fighting. Patrick sighed while defending. He had been fighting. Against so many intruders for hundreds of years now. It was all too familiar. There was nothing interesting left. It didn't matter who he was up against. One way or another, Patrick was going to win anyway. The sound of metal clashing rang out continuously in the space. Nifrim used his two short swords to confront Patrick, but after a while his weapons were knocked backward. Nifrim panted heavily. That last series of moves had wiped him out. Patrick looked at his own weapon as it was knocked aside, neither happy nor sad, and let out a sound. You seem to possess a strength completely different from those others, huh? Not taking a single second to rest, Nifrim immediately stacked a series of buffs to boost his power, strength enhancement, omen flash step, and so on and so forth. Patrick now understood why he was so strong. With a pile of support spells like that, it would be strange if he weren't strong. However, those effects couldn't last long. He silently estimated that it would probably only last about a minute. Just as Patrick went to lift his sword, his whole body felt as if it had frozen solid. Then he slumped heavily to the ground. This was the effect of a paralysis skill. Patrick cursed, "This damn skill again." A triumphant smile appeared on Nifrim's face. "So who's the winner now, you bastard? I didn't think you'd be strong enough to push me this far." Patrick tilted his head toward Sylvia. That kid looks shy, but her magical ability isn't bad at all. To think she could use paralysis to bind me for a moment. Oh, so I should take care of the little mage first, huh? Shut up. Nifrim brutally stomped his foot onto Patrick's chest. Die. He gripped his sword with both hands, then poured all his strength into it, aggressively plunging the blade straight toward Patrick's skull. He thought victory was finally in his hands, but just a split second later, the scene that unfolded left Nifrim frozen in shock. Patrick was using 2 fingers to clamp the tip of the blade, stopping it just a knuckle's length from his skull. A mocking smile appeared on his bony face. "Oh la la, how was my acting?" Nifrim went pale. Patrick's 2 fingers held the sword so tightly that he couldn't even budge it. "It's been a long time since any adventurer has defeated me, so it's been pretty boring. I was just playing along with you all to experience the feeling of defeat for a bit. So how was it? The feeling of pushing your opponent into a corner and having victory within your grasp, pretty good, right? You've had your fun, haven't you?" Patrick's gaze gradually turned cold, and the mockery vanished, replaced by a blazing, murderous intent. "Thank you all for bringing me this joy." Ah! The owner of this terrifying scream was Nifrim. He had just woken up from a brief blackout. Patrick was still sitting there just like a statue. Awake. It only took me a few seconds to summarize everything that happened after you passed out. Still, it's better if you see it for yourself. Following the direction of Patrick's finger, Nifrim could see a mountain of bodies piled up behind him. The name Knight Patrick was clearly not just a hollow title. The truth is, not a single person who has ever crossed paths with him has survived, and this time is no exception. Patrick finds Nefrim foolish for thinking he could possibly win. I suppose you should know by now that no one survives an encounter with me, though it seems all you know is my name and nothing more. Patrick tosses a corpse right in front of Nefrim, the familiar blue hair instantly recognizable. Even without looking at the face, he knows exactly who it is. It's Sylvia. She dared to use holy magic. Just thinking about it makes my bones itch. By the way, Nefrim, that mage kept calling out your name until the very end. She called for you so desperately. Nefrim stares at Sylvia's body, wordless, his face revealing nothing. This deeply irritates Patrick. He was hoping for a more emotional or frantic reaction, but Nefrim's current expression is truly disappointing. Nefrim, you're far too heartless. Now let's get to the interrogation for the only one still breathing, shall we? Patrick is no mere brute. He possesses a sharp, cunning mind. He realized something was off with this expedition immediately. Even if Fimo is an idiot, there is no way he would have sent only 30 men, especially when the army of over 70 men was also completely crushed. Furthermore, the men under Nefrim's command this time, frankly speaking, their capabilities were quite mediocre. Patrick doesn't hold back, pressing his blade against Nefrim's throat. Tell me what you are hiding. Seeing Nefrim remain unresponsive, Patrick loses his patience. He gives him two choices. Raise your right hand if you want to answer voluntarily, or raise your left for a quick, painless death. In less than 3 seconds, Nefrim raises his right hand. Patrick is quite satisfied. Oh, how smart. Now tell me everything you know. After that, I will grant you. Before Patrick can finish, Nefrim folds all his fingers except for the middle one. This displeases Patrick greatly, such a disrespectful gesture. That is no way to treat an undead knight like me, damn it. I can't believe I've been insulted in such a manner. Patrick raises his sword. Fine, then I'll respect your decision. Die slowly. The cold blade ruthlessly pierces Nefrim's chest. His head drops instantly, warm blood dripping onto Sylvia's face. Patrick walks away sluggishly, because he'll have to clean up yet another pile of corpses soon. When there is no movement left, Nefrim suddenly snaps his eyes open. Normally, no one could survive this, but Nefrim is different. He gazes at Sylvia's face and his arms one last time, his emotions in turmoil, then lowers his head and whispers, Sylvia, I'm sorry, but I must survive. The next second, Nefrim opens his mouth wide and begins to consume the corpse of his fallen comrade. The scene is too disgusting to describe, and naturally it catches Patrick's eye. He knew there was something horrifying hidden behind Nefrim, but he never imagined it would be corpse-eating. So eating the dead makes him stronger and heals his wounds. And that power grows with every meal. Patrick doesn't know, but the sound of tearing flesh makes his skin crawl. 1,000 questions race through his mind. Just what kind of creature is Nefrim? Where does his power originate? Is it alchemy or dark magic? The answer remains a mystery. There are countless corpses in the dungeon, and Patrick plans to use those bodies to observe Nefrim meticulously. That is the only way to find the exact truth, he sighs. Now, aside from the wretch eating corpses over there, Patrick still has another concern, his boss. He wonders what Devara is doing out there, and he only hopes his master isn't up to something bizarre. Somewhere strange. Watching over this dungeon is already exhausting enough. Please don't give me more to worry about. Meanwhile, the Blue Crane army is being swallowed by Devara's sea of flames. Just then, Gwyn arrives at the scene. Devara gives her an impatient look, staring with half-lidded eyes. What is this? Did you come here to throw your life away too? No, I am Gwyn Historia, a hero. Hearing the word hero, Devara is clearly more interested. Now he looks at her seriously instead of with the mocking gaze from before. I never asked who you were, but I like your soul. But you cannot defeat me. Gwyn knows this as well. The disparity in their strength has been obvious since the auction house. Yet she must stop Devara for one reason: Gwyn is a hero of this empire. Once again, she channels every ounce of speed and strength she possesses into her gauntlet. Then she punches straight at Devara. But alas, this time he catches the blow with ease. Sorry, but you can only attack me with that move once. No one steps into the same river twice, you know. Devara forcefully grabs Gwyn's arm and applies pressure. A sharp, crisp crack echoes out. Before Gwyn can react, Devara slams her hard into the ground. The force is so great that Gwyn coughs up blood, her internal organs seemingly shattered. She knows she cannot defeat this monster, but at least it seems she has bought a little more time. Devara relentlessly pummels her with a barrage of punches and kicks. Gwyn is in such agony that she screams incessantly. Despite everything, she never forgot she was a hero or her duty to protect humanity and the Empire. Moments later, Gwyn was beaten until she was as limp as a noodle. Deverall lifted her up with one hand, examining her as if he were checking some cheap goods at the market. Is that it already finished? He honestly thought Gwyn was about to go meet her ancestors just now. But right at that moment, the resilient girl opened her mouth to repeat that same boring line, "I am the hero Gwyn Historia." Gwyn's eyes opened, her pale purple pupils slowly losing focus. Yet her attitude remained firm, refusing to surrender. "I cannot fall here. I won't let you lay a finger on my people." Gwyn's gauntleted arm, currently held fast by Deverall, strained as she poured every ounce of remaining strength into her other arm. Her veins and muscles were bulging. She wanted to land one devastating blow on her opponent, but her will was stronger than her body. Her hand just barely brushed against Deverall's chest before going limp and falling to her side. Even then, she didn't forget to repeat that mantra. It was so mechanical, it was almost annoying. "I am the hero. I must protect the innocent." Deverall let go of the hand he was using to hold Gwyn, and she collapsed instantly. "Gwyn Historia, I will remember your name. Though I'm not sure how much longer that will last. Out of respect for someone as brave as you, I'll grant you a clean, painless death." Deverall raised his hand to finish her off, but just then, someone attacked from behind. By the time he reacted, Gwyn had disappeared and an entire army had appeared in her place. As for the girl, she was now in the arms of their leader. "Are you guys sausages or something? Just keep appearing one after another like a string of sausages. Please forgive our rudeness. We were forced to use strong measures to save Ms. Gwyn." Deverall wasn't in the mood for apologies. Because really, who wants to forgive someone who just chucked a rock at the back of their head? The person holding Gwyn stood up, slowly facing Deverall with pride. "Allow me to introduce myself, however belatedly. I am Arch-Healer Thubaris Ga Uviston, a member of the Black Tiger Corps. It is an honor to witness the all-powerful Lord, the Master of the Great Devaris Corps." Deverall narrowed his eyes. "You called me Lord Diva, didn't you? How did you know that?" "I simply had a few clues that helped me identify you, my lord." Arch's confident smile really rubbed Deverall the wrong way. He despised humans who tried to act smart and mysterious in front of him. Mana began to erupt from his body. Deverall's form began to twist, turning into a terrifying half-demon, half-human monstrosity. But Arch, leading the army, showed no intention of attacking. Instead, he acted with extreme deference. He claimed they wanted to make a deal with Deverall. Deverall thought it was the most ridiculous thing he had ever heard. Lowly humans wanting to make a deal with the all-powerful Lord. Especially now that Renee was dead, he had nothing left to lose in this world. "You'd better assess the situation carefully. If you dare to insult me, you won't have a peaceful death." Facing the brutal monster of Imperial myth, Arch felt the pressure, but he dared not let it show that he was terrified. This was a massive gamble, and the price was the ruin of the Empire. He didn't dare make a single mistake. The original owner of the Severing Claws is still alive. This line actually worked. Deverall stopped all movement. The mana enveloping his body also began to settle, becoming calm and steady. Grasping the opportunity, Arch continued, "I am sure you didn't come all this way just to recover one of the 36 virtuous masterpieces, did you? That is why we are here to offer our assistance. And what if I said I don't need it?" Deverall stepped forward, bringing his face inches from Arch's. "What if I take back the Severing Claw just because I'm bored and my true purpose is to wipe out humanity? What will you do then?" Arch broke out in a cold sweat. At this close distance, he could feel the true malice radiating from Deverall. This wasn't a joke, but this wasn't the time to flinch. "If you really intend to destroy everything, then whether I offer a proposal or not, nothing would change, would it? Then go find the owner of this item." Arch knew instantly that a deal had been struck. He turned and called out to Garaz. Garaz possessed a unique type of magic that allowed her to track someone. By using items they had once touched to locate the maid who wielded the sword, Garaz asked Deverall to lend her the Severing Claw for a moment. He didn't hesitate for even a second, because even with the Severing Claw, no human could ever defeat him. "And if you try anything stupid, it won't just be a hand you lose." "Yes, I understand, my lord." Garaz focused her mana into the Severing Claw. After a long moment, she reached a conclusion. "That person is too far for me to pinpoint an exact location, but she is moving toward the west, opposite the Leah Capital Palace." "The west?" "That leads to Hastin." Exactly where Deverall had intended to go. If what Garaz said was true and Renee was on the move, it meant she was still alive. Just thinking about it put Deverall in a much better mood. He let out a long sigh, then slowly retracted that terrifying massive surge of mana. His appearance gradually returned to that of a normal human. That much information is enough. It's slowly starting to look like a normal person again. That's enough information for now. I owe you two, and I'll make sure to remember your names. Devar patted the demon on the shoulder before brushing past them. It's an honor to be of service to you, my lord, go on. And just like that, the capital of Liaz was saved from the brink of destruction. Deverall walked toward the teleportation wheel. Agria was in a truly wretched state now. She had received her orders to come here and hold the line, but these humans were like a string of sausages. Just as soon as one was finished, another would show up. Lord Deverall, you're late. But look at this, I kept my promise, didn't I? I successfully defended the teleportation gate. Adrian flashed a mischievous, eager smile, much like a child hoping to be rewarded with a treat for a job well done. With this, I think it's more than enough to say, welcome back, my lord. Her voice grew faint, and then died out. Agria had been exhausted by the battle and passed out, reverting to her child form. Devar hurried to catch her with his tentacles. This kid really worked herself to the bone today. He stepped toward this teleportation wheel to examine how to use it. It seemed simple enough, just adjust the coordinates to Haston and channel his mana into it to activate it. But the unthinkable happened. The moment Deverall channeled his mana into the device, cracks appeared, and it shattered into pieces. What the hell? The portal couldn't even handle my mana? Deverall stood there with a bunch of question marks over his head, thinking he had done a great job. And I even thought I had it under control. Now that the gate was broken, the only option left was to use his own magic to teleport. But Devar was afraid that doing so would force him back into his true form. That would be far too flashy. Patrick would definitely chop his head off. Damn it, I've stepped onto a path of no return. But there was no other way. Devar couldn't just give up. He removed the ring Patrick had given him to stabilize his mana, and that incredible surge of energy immediately poured out like a waterfall. Sorry, Patrick, but I'm just out of options here. With Devar's transformation, the surrounding scene turned into utter chaos. The Lord had revealed his true form. He had locked onto the coordinates he needed. It was the twin-wing magic tower in the town of Haston. Coincidentally, Renee happened to be at the base of the tower at that very moment. The guard saw her coming and demanded her identity, origin, and some basic information. Naturally, Renee didn't want to talk. Our magic tower has countless people from everywhere every day. You can't enter without verifying your identity. The naive guard still didn't know what kind of terrifying danger he was facing. A second later, 3 swords appeared in Renee's hands. Oh, so it seems you won't be able to escape. Renee finished off the guard without a single wasted motion. She sprinted into the tower. Upon entering for the first time, Renee had thought it was structured like a dungeon, and now she was even more certain the magic tower was just another dungeon created by humans because they were all just weak monsters anyway. Along the way, anyone who crossed Renee's path was slaughtered in misery. Very quickly, all the guards on the first floor were cut down. Renee marched straight to the top floor, where the person she hated most was hiding. Oh my, I was curious who my opponent was. So you aren't human. Romus still kept the same appearance as when she and Renee first met, beautiful but cunning. Where is the head? Oh ho, it's my property. There's no reason for me to tell you, but I am curious. How are you still alive? Renee didn't want to waste words on this woman. She gripped the 3 blades in her hands. Seeing this, Romus wasn't afraid, instead laughing mockingly. Oh my goodness, the weapon you're holding really doesn't suit your small, pretty face at all. Why do you think you can fight me, the master of the magic tower, with just those tiny knives? Romis gently waved her hand to create a massive magical shield, looking extremely arrogant, never thinking that Renee would shatter that magical shield into pieces with just one move. Scared now? You're terrified, aren't you? This terrifying strength of Renee's far exceeded her expectations. But Romus kept her composure. After all, this magic tower was built on an endless spring of mana. Therefore, if she could utilize this infinite source, she would definitely win. Where is my head? Speak quickly, you bitch! Renee grew more intense with every strike, losing her composure more and more. The human side of her face became even murkier. Romus fought back frantically. Too bad that item isn't here anymore. I already brought it to the auction in Liaz. The 2 sides fought until the whole room was a mess. Romus realized that Renee was truly a powerful monster, so she unleashed all her power to fight her opponent. A series of skills were used simultaneously, all aimed directly at Renee. Boom! The top floor of the tower was severely damaged by the massive explosion. Romus's holy magic-like invisible blades pierced through Renee's small body. She coughed hack-hack a few times while the mage laughed in gleeful triumph. Indeed, if a monster like you dares to challenge us humans, you have to face the consequences. Romus was incredibly conceited. The skills she had just used were high-level magic. Only a few dungeon insects with supreme strength could withstand them. But she would never know that her opponent wasn't just any dungeon insect, but belonged to the most difficult dungeon to conquer in the world, the Hell Core. The situation turned rapidly. Romus's two arms which held the scepter were somehow sliced to shreds. Blood poured like a fountain as the pain hit her, causing her agony. Why does it hurt so much? How could this happen to my arms? Renee stared at her opponent, her eyes cold as blades, her face completely expressionless. Don't make such a pathetic scene as if you're actually going to die, you lowly human. Romus finally knew what fear felt like. She didn't want to die, so she desperately begged Renee for mercy. But actions have consequences. Renee wasn't kind enough to forgive someone who had tricked her. The woman's fate was sealed. Renee wanted her to wither away, dying slowly in pain. Everything was over. Renee turned to leave. She felt exhausted and sleepy, her body drifting as if she were walking on clouds. But a piercing scream shattered her focus, snapping Renee back to reality. Leader! A man with blue hair appeared out of nowhere. He hurried to embrace the dying Romus, who lay in a pool of blood. She used her final strength to order him to finish off Renee. The man watched Romus for a moment before handing her a magic stone. Inside was a dark curse exactly like the red gemstone Romus had once scammed Renee with. Seeing it, a wave of nausea surged within Renee, but Romus had no idea what she was about to face. The man told her she was losing too much blood. He claimed the stone would teleport her to safety. Not suspecting a thing, Romus immediately grabbed it and poured her mana into it. The curse triggered instantly. It rapidly engulfed her body. The man broke into a sinister smile. It turned out he was a spy all along because Romus had been doing business so terribly that she had made countless enemies over the years. They had sent him to eliminate her. Luckily, Renee had come for revenge today, saving him a lot of trouble. After pushing Romus into the dark curse, he slipped away during the chaos. Meanwhile, she had been twisted into a monstrous creature with terrifying power, her sanity completely gone. Renee's vision blurred. She couldn't clearly see what the thing in front of her was anymore. She only knew the monster's aura was formidable, and in her current state it would be hard to fight it. But that didn't scare her. She had already wanted a clean final end. All she wanted now was for everything to be over. If she could leave this world here and erase every trace, that would be perfect. But even in death, Renee wanted to go out fighting until her last breath, especially since she wouldn't let these filthy creatures lay a hand on her beloved Devar. Thinking this, Renee lunged forward, stabbing her blade into the monster's eye. Romus writhed in pain and swatted Renee away with brute force. Renee felt her strength failing. She closed her eyes, ready to accept the approaching end. Just then, the magic tower shook with another massive explosion. Renee felt a familiar surge of mana and a steady hand caught her. This scene was so familiar, almost like their first meeting, when Devar had saved her just like this. Everything had been utterly hopeless. Renee had been at death's door, and he had appeared then, just as he did now, to save her. The great Lord Devar. Lord Devar, is that really you? Even seeing him with her own eyes, Renee found it hard to believe. Why would Devar be here? Was this real, or a hallucination of someone on the verge of death? After catching her, Devar gently set her down in a corner. Wait for me a moment. He turned to face Romus, who was now in the form of a monster. That sturdy back made Renee feel instantly at peace. Devar showed absolutely no mercy to Romus. He immediately entered slaughter mode, attacking continuously, leaving the creature no chance to fight back. The way Devar pummeled Romus looked like he was venting all the frustration of the past few days. After all, she was the root of all these problems. If not for that damn red gemstone, Renee wouldn't have run away. And he wouldn't have had to struggle to find her and deal with all this nonsense. Devar kept striking, but Romus was as tough as a cockroach. She wouldn't die despite the beating, which made him incredibly impatient. The monster's blood-soaked, filthy hands made Devar feel pure disgust. I get it now. You keep refusing to die. Must be because you're linked to the endless mana spring beneath this tower, right? Not a lead protagonist for nothing. He finally grasped the core of the issue. Time to change tactics. It was simple enough. If you can't beat them to death, just swallow them whole. With that thought, Devar transformed his body, opened his mouth, filled with razor-sharp teeth, and swallowed Gromus whole. Now just wait for digestion. She wasn't coming back from that. Tough to swallow, really. Tastes disgusting, Devar muttered snarkily. He returned to Renee, who was sitting on the ground, hiding her face in her hands. Devar sat down, leaning his back against hers. He had so much to say. At least he wanted to tell her how hard his journey to find his lost stray had been these past few days. But Devar also knew that Renee's emotions were in complete turmoil, so he chose to comfort her first. Renee, this was my fault. I am truly sorry for everything I've done. Renee's eyes welled up with tears, feeling vulnerable and deeply hurt. You don't need to apologize to me. It was all my fault. These were sincere words. She wasn't just being difficult. Renee was filled with shame and regret. Because of her own petty, selfish desires, she had been played by humans and almost gotten both herself and Lord Devar killed by that curse. Don't say that. The ancient core needs you, and to me, you're also someone very important. These words might sound a bit cheesy, but they were enough to touch Renee's heart. For the past few days, she had been convinced that Devar must have hated and despised her. But hearing him say otherwise with his own mouth finally allowed her to relax her nerves, finally calming down. You don't hate me anymore, my lord. I never hated you. But look, I have something interesting for you. Devar stood up, took out the head-crushing claw, and held it out to her. This was the weapon he had gone through so much trouble to retrieve. Seeing her lost weapon, her emotions instantly overflowed. Tears streamed down like a spring. Renee hurriedly hugged the claw, her tears falling uncontrollably. Renee had been so afraid that Lord Devar would hate her. You won't abandon me, will you? Please don't say that. Devar used actions instead of words. He held out his hand toward Renee, offering a firm promise. Come on, let's go back to the ancient core. Flashback 85 years ago. The first time Devar brought Renee back to the ancient core, she was so tiny and cute. Patrick looked her up and down, rudely mocking her for just being a dwarf. I found the kid during that fire in the Grapinia forest, Devar said, letting out a lazy yawn. But then I saw her in the lab and felt a connection, so I brought her along. We just got close from there. This tiny thing holds all the information and knowledge of the dwarf race. Devar answered Patrick's question with a hum. Moreover, he held Renee in very high regard, because even though it was her first time in the dungeon of the world's strongest boss, the ancient core, she remained calm and obedient. It wasn't just simple stubbornness, because this place is the lair of a demon filled with dense dark energy. It meant her spirit and stamina were strong enough to face things like this. Boss, how do you plan to handle this child? Since he had brought Renee here, Devar wasn't heartless enough to just eat her. He saw great potential in this child, so he wanted her to stay live here and teach her how to fight. And if she can't be taught, then just let her live here in peace. After all, Renee used to be a maid. If she can't fight, we can just leave the laundry and cooking to her. Hold on, boss, are you serious? Who would want to teach her? Patrick looked disgusted. In this life, the thing he hated most was troublesome work being dumped on his head out of nowhere. You who else, come on, cheer up. No way. Why me come on, stop pretending to be cold. Devar knew perfectly well that Patrick was just playing hard to get when in reality he was bored to death with nothing to do. Having Renee as company wouldn't be so bad. Why act like he hated it? Patrick asked for her name. Devar vaguely remembered it was something like Leo Lu, but Patrick thought the name was ugly and short. Besides, since Devar had adopted her, he should give her a new name to commemorate this milestone of her rebirth. Devar thought that made sense. He thought for a moment, let's call her Renee. And so, from that day on, Renee had a new name, Renee Leo Lu. Her life turned a new page from that moment. Patrick was also quite fond of the child. The first thing he taught her wasn't how to fight, but how to smile. The memory passed 85 years later. Now they were returning to the ancient core once again. Patrick greeted his lord with an attitude that wasn't exactly friendly. Wow, you still look so relaxed even in this situation. What the hell did you do at Haston to make the earth shake so hard that we felt it all the way at the ancient core? Facing Patrick's interrogation, Devar didn't know what to say. Would it sound reasonable to lie and say he was dancing the cha-cha in the middle of the road? Or should he honestly confess that his identity had been exposed and he had revealed his true form while teleporting from LHS? Back here. And I even smashed a human magic tower. Patrick, the life of a monster is always full of exceptions, right? The exception is that thing, right? Patrick pointed at Agria. The little girl was still snoring in Deverall's arms, looking even smaller than Renee did when they first met. It's a long story, Deverall stammered. Patrick was startled. Did his boss go out on a mission and casually kidnap a child while he was at it? Deverall dumped Agria on the ground. Heaven is my witness, I didn't want to bring this burden with me, and besides, where is Renee? That was the main topic Patrick cared about. Deverall kept humming and hawing, seemingly not wanting to talk about it. Patrick, I met Renee at a human village. She looked tired and frail. I was wondering if we had been interfering with her personal life lately. Patrick dismissed it immediately. If you have already been rejected by her, just say it directly. Why be so wordy and cheesy? Devar was hit right in the heart and felt extremely embarrassed. To cover his shame, he ordered Patrick to take Renee's place from now on, specifically to wear a maid outfit and manage the entire dungeon. Patrick immediately pulled out a resignation letter he had hidden in his ribs. Boss, this is inhumane labor exploitation. So what do you plan to do now? Devar didn't know either. There was nothing left to do in the dungeon, but he would wait. That was all he could do. He had already said everything he could earlier. Now he could only wait for Renee to have a change of heart and come back on her own. Although he didn't know how long he would have to wait. Patrick felt sad too. He left first, thinking his boss wanted to be alone, but after taking only a few steps, Patrick saw a familiar figure at the door. The long silver hair, the petite figure, and that maid outfit. Boss, she's back. Who else would it be but the one you've been waiting for? Renee has truly returned, and she's just as she was before. Beaming with a radiant smile, she asked what Devar would like to eat so she could prepare it. But this time, Patrick couldn't shake the feeling that something about her was strange. Looking closer, he saw that Renee's right eye had turned a shimmering gold. Boss, did you seriously give her that? Are you out of your mind? Patrick asked, eyeing Devar skeptically. After all, just a while ago when they took down Chromis, Renee's right eye had been completely destroyed. Devar didn't even hesitate. He'd plucked out one of his own eyes and given it to her, along with a promise, as long as your heart remains true and you still hold that stone, I don't care how long it takes. Think it over carefully. And then bring me the love stone next time. That was the reason Renee had returned with that new golden-eyed persona. She was even more obsessed with her lord than before. Renee swore that from now on she would stay by Devar's side and never leave him again. A long while later, Agria also woke up. As soon as she opened her eyes, she saw Patrick sharpening his blade nearby. Agria's soul nearly left her body. What is this? Am I dead? Is the person in front of me the Grim Reaper? Is this hell? Oh, I'm so sorry. This isn't the afterlife, this is the ancient core. The moment she heard the words, ancient core, Agria's eyes lit up like stars. She realized immediately that the man before her wasn't the Grim Reaper, but the Death Knight Patrick. Patrick gave a thumbs up in approval. This kid's pretty sharp, isn't she? Seeing that Agria was awake, Patrick kicked the nearby snoozing Devar to wake him up. Devar let out a long, lazy yawn and looked at Agria. Oh, you're up. Agria was completely overwhelmed by his massive, towering presence. She stood there with her mouth hanging open, unable to close it. My Lord Master of the ancient core embodiment of creation, guardian of the gods, punisher of the cowardly supreme, ancient monster. Devar Agria knelt down and bowed her head, rattling off her speech like a tape recorder. Devar had heard this all before. It sounded just like how she'd praised her lord back at Lys. Deverall noticed the phrasing was identical. Before he could even get a word in, the Agria brand recording continued at full power. Your Majesty, no, that's not it. Please forgive me. Allow me to introduce myself. I am the 17th descendant of the Demon King Asmodeus Melzalin Fagria. Even the introduction hadn't changed a single syllable. This child. She functions like a pre-recorded tape. Yeah, I know already. How do you know my name? Agria was both shocked and honored. She thought to herself, Master Swando must have introduced me to Lord Devar, right? Speaking of which, where was Swando? She only remembered that the last time they met, Swando had been crushing those humans in the capital of Lys and had snatched back the decapitated claw. Seeing how clueless the girl was, Devar couldn't be bothered to hide his identity any longer. I am Swando. Agria's expression went through a complex transformation, first confusion, then shock, and finally her face turned deathly pale. Oh no. The enemy Swando was Devar, and Devar was Swando. That meant the person accompanying her all this time had been the great Lord Devar himself. Agria felt like the sky was falling. Had she unknowingly shown disrespect to Lord Devar? I'm dead. I'm dead. I'm as good as dead. Boss Patrick suddenly spoke up, cutting off their conversation. About what the Demon King Mel said earlier regarding how you crushed those humans in Lias. Why didn't you tell me about that? There it was, he was actually getting scolded. Meanwhile, in the Grapenia forest on the border of the Haston territory, two commoners were sneaking around. They were in the Forbidden Forest looking for herbs and mushrooms when suddenly, one of them noticed some movement nearby. A blonde figure heavily injured and fallen from nowhere was writhing in pain. Seeing how badly hurt the stranger was, the kind-hearted girl hurriedly rummaged through her bag for herbs, but unexpectedly the stranger lunged at her like a rabid dog and bit her. That face. Who else could it be? But Nephrim blood splattered all over the storm lantern the girl was carrying. You don't need to be told how her fate ended. The scene shifted instantly. A tall, thin figure wrapped in a tattered white cloak was walking unsteadily. The direction he was heading was the protective wall of the Hastin territory. I must go. At the same time, inside the ancient core dungeon, a battle broke out. But it wasn't between Devar and the humans. It was between two girls, Renee and Agria. If you are a true Demon King, act with some dignity. Agria, how many times do I have to tell you? Keeping quiet during Lord Devar's nap time is the most basic rule. No, I won't. I am a free monster. I won't be bound by rules. Besides, I came to the ancient core to keep Lord Devar company and talk to him. The two were locked in a heated standoff, neither willing to back down. Renee wanted to protect Devaral's rest, stemming from her long-standing affection and absolute devotion to her lord. Agria, on the other hand, wanted to cling to Devaral, also stemming from a deep, lifelong worship. Whether she had a crush on him like Renee did was unclear, but the little girl was certainly feisty, refusing to lose to Renee by even an inch. I will stay by his side and keep him warm, until Lord Devar drifts off to sleep, that is. When it comes to this, Renee's old-fashioned mindset is just too passive. You're exactly the type of girl the Lord finds old-fashioned. No wonder the Overlord doesn't like you. This sentence hit the war switch in Renee's head. She didn't know where this little rival came from. Livid that she was losing her spot as the only female in the ancient core dungeon and now being openly mocked for being old-fashioned. Renee's eyes turned red with rage as she scrambled to pull out her weapon. Damn it, I'm going to take you out! Agria knew she couldn't beat her, so she just laughed out loud and scrambled away. Come on then, Nyanya over here. Patrick was gritting his teeth, holding himself back from turning those two troublemakers into stew. Ever since Agria came here, this place has been like hell. Not a single second of peace. Even Devar, who usually sleeps 20 hours a day, was losing his mind because Renee and Agria were being so loud he couldn't get a wink of sleep. You don't have the right to complain about them being noisy, sir. Thanks to whose idea was it to bring that baggage here, making our dungeon such a mess? Plus, the world out there is in chaos too. It's that serious. Patrick knew Devar hadn't bothered reading any of the human newspapers he brought, so he clearly had no clue what was going on out there. After the incident where you appeared in the capital, soldiers were deployed here to strengthen security for Laces. Because of that, the villages on the border are constantly being attacked by monsters. And that's not all. I don't know why, but Lord Haston committed suicide, so this territory is now completely paralyzed. I've read all the papers from the last 3 weeks, but there have been very few articles about Haston. Do you know what that means, sir? No, Patrick just wanted to give Devar a good thrashing. Honestly, other than eating, sleeping, and causing trouble, he was good for nothing. He really wanted to hand in his resignation. So what do you think, Patrick? Patrick wasn't entirely sure about his theory, but he suspected that Haston had already been cut off from the outside world. Recently, Devar, you destroyed the town of Hastin while in your monster form, yet that event went completely silent. It didn't even make the papers. It's very suspicious. Patrick cared about this territory, because it was the human village closest to the ancient core. If they kept an eye on Hastin's movements, they could be more proactive in tracking conquest teams heading their way, including their forces and the timing of when they would attack the ancient core. But currently, if Hastin has truly been cut off, then if any conquest team arrives there,
The information would certainly not be reported in the news. I think I need to get to Haston quickly to scout it out.
If we leave it like this, the consequences will be unimaginable.
Right. Well, have a safe trip then. Don't push yourself so hard that you end up pushing yourself into an early grave. Dever thought to himself, please go by yourself. Please just go by yourself. He had just returned after days of hard labor, and now he only wanted to eat and sleep. Then I will return as soon as possible, Lord Devar. Devar perked up. Was it that easy? Could Patrick really go alone without dragging anyone else along? Well, that was fine, too. As long as he could get some sleep, nothing else mattered. But 2 steps away, Patrick turned back and shot Devar a look that wasn't friendly at all. Boss, don't you think it'll be incredibly hard for me to go alone? I think it would be better to have at least one person with me. Devar was so startled he jumped up immediately. Why in the world was he a boss who was being pushed around by his employee like this? Devar's gaze landed on the 2 troublemakers fighting. The #1 candidate was Agria, but he didn't rate that baggage very highly. Even though she was a demon king and her magic was quite good, she was particularly dangerous. If he had to evaluate that girl's magic, it would be more accurate to call it explosive magic. If she went with Patrick and used that restructuring spell like she did in the capital, the entire town of Haston would be annihilated. Devar shook his head vigorously. No matter how he looked at it, Agria wasn't suitable. Then moving on to candidate #2, Renee. She was already very familiar with Patrick, but on second thought, sending Renee was even worse, because compared to Agria, she was exponentially more dangerous. If the other girl was explosive magic, Renee's existence was super-duper explosive magic. Especially since she was currently in a sensitive phase of hating humans. Letting Renee into a human village right now was no different than a ticking time bomb. Just then, Patrick excitedly voiced his idea. Since I don't know how long I'll be gone, why don't you come with me, Lord? Good heavens. Even if someone paid him, Devar didn't want to go into a human village. But truth be told, he was currently the most suitable choice. However, he just wanted to sleep. Suddenly, an excuse popped into his head. It seems I am the best choice in this situation, isn't it? But unfortunately, I can't transform because I accidentally broke the Demira bracelet. Or something like that. Devar was thrilled, thinking he was too smart for his own good. Now Patrick couldn't force him to go. Oh, is that so? It's true that without the bracelet you can't come with me. Which means if I have the bracelet, you'll go right. Wait, hold on. Why didn't things go the way I wanted? In the end, Devar was still grabbed by the collar and dragged out of the dungeon. On the way, he cursed that Patrick would die in agony, but Patrick just laughed out loud. What a pity Patrick was already dead to begin with. No one knew how. He managed to get his hands on a similar Demira bracelet, leaving Devara with no choice but to tag along with Patrick to Haston for that 20-hour sleep. And just like that, the value of it all vanished into thin air. In all my life, I've only seen bosses force employees to work overtime. This is the first time I've ever seen an employee force their boss to go on a business trip. The 2 of them traveled for quite a while before arriving, and the scene before them. Haston was incredibly gloomy and bleak. You could tell the moment you reached the gate. Boss, you've really stirred up some big trouble now. Patrick let out a weary sigh, explaining that there are usually 4 ways to check if a village is thriving. The first way is to see if the market is bustling, but the 2 of them arrived at the town's night market, and it was quieter than an empty graveyard. The second way is to see if there is plenty of smoke coming from the chimneys. But since it was past dinner time, that was hard to tell. Devara, feeling like they were wasting time, asked what the third way was, and Patrick replied that it's to check how many subjugation teams are on the quest board. But since Haston didn't have one of those, they skipped it. Then what the hell are we checking for at this hour? Let's just go home, seriously. There was still one final way, the inns and taverns. The 2 of them talked while walking until they reached the door of the largest tavern in town. Without waiting for Patrick to say another word, Devara charged in first. Whenever alcohol is involved, they get excited right away. Landlord, do you have any rooms left? Before the words could even fully leave his mouth. Devara was stunned by the eerie scene before him. Though it was exactly what Patrick had expected, there wasn't a single soul inside. This was the worst-case scenario. Haston was no longer an ordinary town. Not far from there, at the border of Haston, corpses were piled high into mountains, all of them having met a terrifying end. Under the cold night rain, the scene felt even more haunting. Everyone has worked hard. After sweeping through Haston, we will head to the Leah capital, the very heart of the enemy's territory. Humanity has never been weaker in the face of the Black Calamity. This is the perfect moment to wipe out this empire. Looking closely, you'd notice this wasn't that tall, lanky guy.
Was this the guy who was wandering outside the walls of Haston yesterday? The key point was his face. It was nothing more than a skull. No matter how you looked at it, it was clearly a monster. Patrick and Devara examined the tavern for a while. The situation was far more serious than they had imagined. It seemed Haston had just been hit by a brutal attack and was now completely paralyzed. "Who are you people?" A trembling voice echoed from the loft. "I am the owner of this tavern. What is your purpose here?" It was easy to see that he was extremely tense and terrified. To reassure him, Patrick introduced them as knights of the subjugation team. Black Mist Patarian from Nichanze were just passing through wanting a simple meal and a place to stay for the night. Upon learning they were customers, the landlord relaxed a bit, but as he came downstairs, he said it was a pity that the tavern no longer had enough food for a night. Or rather, it wasn't just this tavern. Even if you scoured the whole village, there was no place left with enough food. Is this because of the Black Calamity? So you know about that, too. I am sorry, but my tavern doesn't have any rooms left for guests either. I hope you can understand. Patrick pondered for a moment. It seemed that in this situation, the price of food and water was even higher than the room, but that was fine. What money can't solve a lot of money definitely can. Patrick generously tossed the landlord one shining gold coin, and sure enough, the man's attitude changed instantly. As quick as a squirrel, the landlord pointed the way and invited Patrick upstairs. "This way, please, honored guests." As Patrick stepped onto the stairs, the landlord noticed the small person following behind him. "May I ask, who is this?" "Oh, he is my servant called." "He's just a servant, but he helps me out a lot." Devara wasn't very happy being called a servant by his subordinate in front of an outsider, but in all fairness, looking at their current appearance, he really did look like Patrick's servant. Once the two reached the room, Devara was quite surprised that the quality of the accommodation was better than expected. At the very least, it blew that 8 silver coin room in the capital that he and Agria had rented previously out of the water. Devara lazily flopped onto the bed and started nagging Patrick. "Couldn't you think of a more suitable identity than calling me a servant?" "It's not that I couldn't think of one, it's just that, in that situation, that was the most logical choice. Look at the clothes you're wearing that you consider comfortable. If you keep going out dressed like that, people are going to treat you like a beggar." Patrick paused after his long speech, then added, "Actually, they'd treat you even worse than a beggar," explaining that introducing Devara as a servant was the most sensible move, even though slaves are also a low class like beggars. At least outsiders would look at the master and not dare to mess with them, since Patrick looked so fierce and had introduced himself as a knight. The landlord certainly wouldn't dare to give Devara any trouble. "By the way, boss, why is it that when you go out on a mission, you act like you're on a vacation? Why bother? If there's the next life, I swear I'm reincarnating as a rock. Since you're so relaxed, you go ahead and rest. I'm heading out. It's only their first day out there." Devara advised Patrick not to overdo it, but Patrick didn't want to waste any time. After all, it was the middle of the night. Who would know what he was up to? Coming here this time, Patrick had already caught wind of the reason for the black disaster befalling most of Haston's territory. It was the royal family's rage in the face of the encroaching catastrophe. And they certainly needed someone to take the fall for the consecutive failed attempts to conquer the ancient core. However, before the royals could intervene, the Lord of Haston had already passed away. His death remained a huge question mark in Patrick's mind. So who is the Lord of Haston now? It's been bothering me. Clearly the royal family is making mistake after mistake. They're too focused on conquering the ancient core, but instead of admitting their error, they're blaming the great clans of the empire. Patrick thought to himself, if I were a descendant of Itak, could I sit on that lord's throne? Thinking of this, Patrick leaped onto the rooftops like a flash. Time to head to the Haston Lord's castle and at least get a look at the new lord. But this was more troublesome than Patrick thought, because even though the town was sparse, the castle was still heavily guarded. He began to weigh whether he should just knock them all out, but that would definitely bring a ton of trouble tomorrow. Haste makes waste. Patrick turned back, deciding to return to the inn to sleep, but on the way something changed his mind. Patrick, it seems people didn't notice it, but he sensed it very clearly, the heavy pungent scent of rotting corpses coming from somewhere within this territory. At the same time, Devar, who was sprawled out sleeping at the inn, was woken up by insistent knocking. Sir Knight, are you in there?" Thinking it was something serious, Devar had to open the door. He covered for his master, saying he had gone out for a night stroll and the innkeeper didn't suspect a thing. It was just that the innkeeper had prepared a late-night meal. Although food was scarce, Patrick had tipped him 1 gold coin, far too generous, so he wanted to repay the favor. Now that you mention it, we haven't properly introduced ourselves, have we? I'm Novan Heat, but just call me Novan.
And you? I'm Swando. Listen, Swando, I hope you won't be disappointed, but what's left is only enough for me to whip up a few small dishes. Devar really hadn't thought the situation here was so dire that they were running out of food. But Novan considered it more than just a disaster. Everyone who witnessed the black disaster with their own eyes went insane, and Lord Attack ended his own life right after. And after that, well, you saw for yourself. Hastin's information flow was completely cut off from the outside world. No one in, no one out. If you step outside the walls, you'll just see people dying of hunger piled up in heaps. The innkeeper also kindly warned Devar and Patrick to leave this place as soon as possible. Although he didn't know what their purpose was, Novan himself was about to leave anyway. Although I don't want to leave Hastin, you know, when people are backed into a corner, they're capable of doing anything. Just then, a pair of dirty, grimy feet appeared on the windowsill. A child emerged with messy red hair and a face full of starvation. While Devar followed the innkeeper downstairs, the kid darted his eyes around the room, then hopped inside. He flashed a cunning grin. Good. If they see the state of this village and still choose to stay, they must be from out of town. He also realized the room that Devar and Patrick were staying in was the most expensive one, which meant these two had a lot of money. The motive was clear: this kid wanted to steal something valuable, to sell for money. He even planned to use Devar's rag-like clothes to wrap up the stolen goods instead of a bag. The kid approached a chest in the room, but when he saw it was empty, his expression turned sour. Damn it, don't tell me they took everything and already left. But with unwavering persistence, he kept searching the whole room. Finally, he found something in a dresser drawer. I knew it. They couldn't possibly have taken everything right. But before he could even celebrate, he broke into a cold sweat. It seemed he had just seen something he shouldn't have. By midnight, Patrick returned from his visit to the Lord's castle. Devar had eaten his fill and was back to camping out on the bed. Originally, Patrick had wanted to get a look at the new Lord, but it was more heavily guarded than he'd expected, so he returned empty-handed. So, boss, did you find anything? Patrick only asked out of obligation, not expecting anything from his lazy master. Devar, of course, had no information other than knowing that, for now, Hastin was practically isolated from the outside world. Devar had tried to pry information from the innkeeper earlier, but it seemed he didn't know much. Unexpectedly, upon hearing this, Patrick made a face like he'd been struck by lightning. He didn't think his boss could actually do something useful, even if it was just confirming something everyone already knew, that Hastin was isolated from the outside world. So let's go find out more about why Hastin is isolated tomorrow, boss. If Patrick had eyes, he would definitely be giving him those puppy dog eyes right now. But Devar was too lazy to show his face outside at all. Patrick didn't like this attitude of his master's one bit. Clearly we came out to work, but in the end, only I am doing the work. Patrick suddenly noticed 2 windows standing wide open. When he left, he had only left one open just a crack. Leaving both windows wide open like this is just asking for a thief to waltz right in, boss. Please keep opening the windows to an absolute minimum. At this rate, we're going to get robbed for sure. Devar had been wearing a confused expression ever since he stepped into this room. His range of motion had been strictly limited to the bed area. Nobody touched the windows, ha, come on now, boss. There's no way that could have happened. The wind can't just unlatch the windows on its own, or are you suggesting it was a ghost? Who cares, ghost or thief, it doesn't matter. There was definitely someone here. It was someone opening the window, not me, Devar said, startling himself with his own outburst. He bolted upright and searched around. Damn, his cloak was actually gone. That cloak was made by Renee, and if it went missing, Devar was terrified he'd be sliced to bits. Patrick's belongings had vanished too, and he looked even more flustered than his master. What exactly did you lose? Patrick turned around, looking utterly bleak. Well, it's my rib. By now, the culprit who stole Devar's rag and Patrick's rib had already long since vanished. This kid, Rosalina, had run quite a distance from the inn when she was blocked by a few men. They didn't seem too happy about her being out in the middle of the night. Rosalina was still wandering outside, stiffening her neck and arguing that she had a valid reason. She insisted she was doing this for everyone's sake, but the man didn't seem moved at all. In fact, he shouted right in her face, "Is it really for everyone's sake to waste your energy like this and just end up hungrier?" "It's not a waste. Just take this and see for yourself." Rosalina refused to back down, but another man's voice cut through their heated argument. "Tot! Don't be so harsh." The man called Tot and Rosalina both turned their heads. The man who had just arrived was someone the girl called Leader. He told Tot he shouldn't be snapping at the kid.
After all, a thief shouldn't be afraid of the dark. Rosalina's mistake was just wandering off without telling us. Hostin was already a chaotic mess. He believed her actions could bring a lot of trouble to everyone. This place wasn't like their old home that had welcomed the girl with open arms. Rosalina finally bowed her head and murmured an apology.
Yes, I'll be more careful, leader.
Once the scolding was over, the leader wanted to know where Rosalina had been all night. The girl excitedly took the bundle off her shoulder and laid it on the ground. Tot's expression turned grim as he saw what was inside while Rosalina kept rambling about stealing it from a room. It was the most expensive inn on the main street. She was convinced that the white thing was a very valuable antique. The man called the leader stayed silent for a few seconds. Finally, he decided to tell her the horrifying truth behind this antique.
Rosalina, this is a human rib.
Rosalina's face went pale instantly. She was absolutely terrified as she had no idea it was human bone. Tot even wondered if she had gone digging up graves, but Rosalina vehemently denied it. The leader picked up the bone to examine it. He figured it was either for some cruel, twisted hobby, or for dark magic because no normal person collects human bones. They started to get scared. If this belonged to someone skilled in necromancy or dark magic, then they were in big trouble. Not to mention those clothes Rosalina brought back. At first glance, they looked like nothing more than beggar's rags, but when the leader picked them up, he immediately realized they were made of the finest quality fabric. When he lifted them, he could hear a sound coming from the pockets. The contents were enough to make their eyes go wide. It was a handful of gold coins. Tot and Rosalina's eyes lit up instantly, but the leader grew frantic. "You idiots, this is not the time to be happy." "But boss, do you know how much effort it took me to get these?" The leader was breaking out in a cold sweat. Guests at a luxury inn in a ruined village. No matter how he looked at it, this wasn't simple. Plus, the stolen items included bones, human ribs, and clothes made of high-end fabric, all containing a large amount of gold. He knew that little leopard cub had messed with the wrong people. Sure enough, right as that thought crossed his mind, Devar and Patrick had already tracked them down. "Hello there, thieves. We're here to take our things back." Devar looked at the items in the leader's hands, confirming his belongings were safe. He let out a sigh of relief. If that coat had actually been lost, Renee would have made him sleep outside. Patrick also felt a heavy weight lift. If Renee got angry again, he wasn't sure if she might just blow their entire dungeon to pieces. Rosalina's leader was actually a righteous man. In this situation, even though he was terrified, he stepped forward to shield the girl and Tot. "How did you find us?" "Who knows?" Patrick shrugged. "Looks like those items were really longing for their owner." Devar picked his nose and let out a long, sleepy yawn. All he wanted right now was to go home and sleep. Seeing his lord getting sleepy again, Patrick wanted to wrap this up quickly. He demanded the leader return the items, promising they wouldn't hold a grudge. But the leader seemed like a cautious guy. He was afraid that after getting their things back, Devar and Patrick wouldn't keep their word and would just kill them all. His intuition told him the two people in front of him were incredibly dangerous, because even if they had tracked Rosalina, it was far too dark for them to have found their target so quickly. Unless these two were demons, it should have been impossible, he thought, scaring himself with his own realization. Behind him, the leopard cub Rosalina, oblivious to the gravity of the situation, was still clutching a piece of Patrick's rib. The girl's leader reached out and took the two bones, holding them out in front of him. "I guess these ribs are pretty important to you, huh?"
"Oh, of course.
"They are a part of my body, after all." As soon as Patrick confirmed this himself, the leader hurled the two bones high into the air. Before they could even fall, he ordered Tot to take the others and evacuate. Patrick scrambled to catch his bones, ending up sprawled out on the ground. Seizing the moment, a guy lurking in a nearby dark alley lunged out and delivered a crushing blow straight to his head. But Patrick was fine, and the weapon in the man's hand shattered into pieces. Devar watched this scene. His expression didn't change, and he let out a lazy yawn again.
What is this? They just used a rock as a weapon.
How come there isn't a single decent weapon among them? Just as Devar thought that, another guy came charging from behind with a blade, trying to stab him in the back. Talk about ask, and you shall receive. Oh, look, this one actually has a proper weapon. He casually snapped the blade in half with his bare hands. Then he generously gave the guy some free dental work with a kick. Devar lifted him up and turned to Patrick, asking for his opinion. "How should we deal with this one master?" "Boss, you don't have it to play act anymore. Calling me master is going to cost me years of my life. How about we just knock them all unconscious for now? You want to let them live?"
"I didn't say that.
We should get this over with quickly. Devar and
Patrick split up and began the job of cleaning up the gang. With their strength, this was no challenge at all. But perhaps due to a keen intuition back home, Renee kept feeling restless. She guessed that the job of Lord Devar and Patrick was still going smoothly right. Agria put on a bored expression. Devar had only been gone for half a day, and she had already asked the same question 49 times. Agria tried to calm her down, but Renee kept complaining. Devar was a legendary monster, the master of the ancient core. Why was she constantly worried that he would have to go hungry or be bullied by humans? Over there, Patrick and Devar had finished off the robbers. He let out a sigh of relief again, seeing that his coat was still intact. Speaking of that leader, Patrick was actually quite impressed. Even though he was just an ordinary human, he had managed to ambush him earlier. Patrick originally wanted to pull the weeds out by the roots, but unexpectedly after getting his cloak back, Devar lazily lay down on the ground and seemed like he didn't want to move a muscle anymore. You should lie down too, Patrick. It's more comfortable here than you'd think. Patrick really wanted to take a hoe to his lord's face and submit his resignation. One more time, just at that moment, Rosalina with a terrified face emerged from the alley. She stammered an apology to the two of them for stealing. It was me who stole it, the others have nothing to do with this, so please spare them. The girl even knelt on the ground to beg. Tot ran over as well, trying to pull Rosalina up. Get up, kid. Do you really think doing that will make these bastards spare us? Never. Devar, lying comfortably with his legs crossed, let out a sound. Since Tot had said that he didn't mind ordering Patrick to finish them off. Patrick received the order from his lord. Tot took a step forward toward those two. Even though he was terrified, he pulled out a dagger to defend himself and pulled Rosalina behind him for protection. In her panic, the girl didn't know what else to do but clutch a crucifix in her hand to pray. Patrick was drawn to this object. He didn't even land a single punch or kick. He bypassed Tot, stood directly in front of her, and stared intently at the item in her hand. Tell me, where did you get that? This isn't just some ordinary trinket. It's a phoenix-shaped crucifix, looking like an inverted cross. Furthermore, Patrick could feel mana flowing out of it, Guardian Mana. Guardian Mana was now radiating from a peasant. Patrick hurried back to Deverall. He suspected that someone was monitoring the residents of Haston, and the proof was that when the girl held the cross to pray, the Guardian Mana had radiated from it. That means the crucifix only activates under specific conditions. Boss, if we can figure out those conditions, then we might discover what kind of scheme the owner of that cross is plotting. Deverall wasn't very interested. Haston was no longer a magic village after all. But Patrick was determined to investigate to the end. He changed his plan to work with the humans. After all, teamwork with humanity might be easier than teamwork with Deverall. Is it really necessary to go that far? How do you intend to resolve this situation anyway? Patrick struck an incredibly arrogant pose, then tapped his finger against his head. Even though there was no brain inside his skull to think with, he naturally had a plan. It's brilliant. Boss. Almost immediately, Patrick changed his attitude. He put on a conciliatory expression, apologized to the gang of thieves, and then I calmly lied that he was from the Knights of the Shadow, a secret organization reporting directly to the royal family known as the Mist of Romano. He claimed he had received a decree. The royal decree was to clear out anyone causing trouble for him, so the reason they were beaten up just now wasn't for stealing, but because they had stolen from Patrick. His tall, imposing frame in shining armor was in fact quite fitting for this persona. So Rosalina's group of thieves believed it hook, line, and sinker. We had no intention of harming anyone, so please stand down. Faced with this situation, they actually let their guard down. Why are you in Haston, Sir Knight? I have come here to save Haston. Following this flowery introduction, Patrick said that he was defying the royal decree, risking his own life to save the people of Hastin. To do that, he needed information from them. Patrick said he needed to assess the situation to analyze and send personnel as well as necessary supplies to Haston. Isn't everyone working together to restore the peace of Hastin? I need the help of you all. The group of thieves began to buzz with excitement. The appearance of a royal knight here to save Haston was truly unimaginable, even though in reality, that wasn't the case at all. But they truly believed that the Emperor had not abandoned them. To escape this life of misery, they decided to join forces with Patrick. Negotiating with humanity was easier than Patrick imagined. While Deverall remained the same, he had no interest in this whatsoever. The only thing that Deverall cared about was when they could go back to the ancient core. We've only just begun, boss. I'm already starting to see a lot of irregularities here. Deverall yawned repeatedly. Patrick was indeed very serious and hard-working, but he had a feeling that everything was getting more and more troublesome, and Deverall, didn't want to get involved in these annoying matters at all. He held his head and threw himself down on the road, throwing a tantrum. Stop lying on the road. Things have already come to this, so don't be lazy anymore and get up to work. Never had Deverall wished more that Patrick would be as lazy as he was. Patrick began to delegate tasks. He said he would keep an eye on the leader of the thieves because he was the most suspicious one. Deverall's job was to stay with the villagers and try to get close to them. Deverall turned pale upon hearing this. He was the master of the ancient core, the most powerful demon yet. Patrick wanted him to go befriend humans. Not to mention, Deverall was a half-baked introvert with tendencies toward antisocial behavior. There's no other choice, boss. Between a knight fully equipped with a helmet and armor and someone who looks like a beggar, who do you think would be easier for them to get close to? Deverall was extremely annoyed to be called a beggar by his subordinate. However, Patrick wasn't wrong. Patrick set a deadline for him to integrate with the humans before he returned. And of course, he had to do it the way humans usually do. Deverall felt very confused. How would he know what humans usually do to build rapport? Deverall thought humans were just like him. They probably spent all day sleeping, and those who were awake were probably daydreaming or slacking off. Generally speaking, their motivation was zero. Patrick was speechless. His lord was clearly projecting his own nature onto them. Be serious, my lord. I need you to dig information out of those people. The faster we finish, the sooner we can go home and rest right. Deverall felt immense pressure as if Patrick was truly the master in this relationship. Patrick didn't forget to remind Deverall that befriending humans was not easy. If they were a bit rude, he had to keep his cool with all his might. Deverall wasn't very willing, but he had no choice but to agree with him. But the situation progressed differently from what Patrick thought. The humans were not only not rude, but they were also overly enthusiastic toward Deverall. They weren't the least bit judgmental about Deverall's beggar-like appearance. Instead, they assumed he was in disguise to investigate them, continuously addressing him with the grand title of Sir Knight, and they fired a 10,000-question barrage at him, driving him absolutely insane. The overlord of the underworld really wanted to swallow these humans whole right now, but Deverall recalled the words Patrick had said earlier, so he swallowed his irritation. Must be friendly, must be friendly. Deverall muttered to himself, then turned to the child who was hanging off his cloak. So what are you curious about, kid? The child's eyes lit up instantly. They asked if Deverall had ever seen Sir Vern and Lady Gwyn in person, Gwyn being the sharp-tongued woman who had once faced off against Deverall. But the name only sounded vaguely familiar, and he had no impression of them at all. No, I don't even know who they are, Deverall snapped. Just then Rosalind shyly approached from a distance. She was incredibly nervous, but still wanted to offer a proper apology for stealing Deverall's belongings. He clicked his tongue and let it slide. After all, he'd already gotten his stuff back. Deverall didn't want to nitpick with a child. Tot had just finished dispersing the crowd of gawking villagers and walked over to reintroduce himself to Davar. The leader of the bandit group had ordered Tot to take charge and do whatever Deverall requested, but Deverall hadn't expected Tot to be just as enthusiastic as Patrick. Tot said, if you want to understand the village's current situation, you should see it with your own eyes instead of just hearing about it. If you wish, I will lead you on a tour of the village right now, Devar. He groaned internally 1,000,000,000 times, I don't want to go. He didn't understand where humans got all that energy and enthusiasm. But if he just sat there, Deverall wouldn't be able to escape the role of MC for the 10,000 Questions show. So he decided to head out with Tot. The two arrived at the first residential area, but the streets were deathly quiet, which left Deverall very confused. Tot led him to a wooden door, and said that once this door opened, his questions would be answered. Just say it already. Stop being so mysterious, Deverall thought irritably, though he followed instructions anyway. Tot pushed the door open slightly. The first sight that hit him was a couple lying sprawled on the ground. It seemed they had stopped breathing. According to Tot, these were people who had died of starvation here. People couldn't even steal food from their neighbors because no one had any food left to steal. The villagers lived in a state of not knowing when it would be their turn to be taken by death. By starvation. This left Deverall deeply puzzled. Usually, when a village faced a famine, the anger would be directed at the local lord, and the angry populace would rise up and revolt. But the problem was that the people of Hastin were enduring starvation to the point of collapse instead of fighting back. Tot? It was as if he could read Deverall's thoughts. He threw the windows of the house wide open and looked pensive. The black disaster has been plaguing Hastin for over a month now.
Why is the village so quiet? And why aren't the people rising up against him? Are you curious, Sir Knight?
While Deverall was losing his mind in Hastin, the two ladies left to guard the underworld core weren't having a great time either. Agria felt life here was boring to death. She wanted to go to Hastin to find her idol. Of course, Renee wouldn't give her the chance. How could someone as principled as her neglect the responsibilities in the house that the Overlord himself had entrusted to them? Lord Devar has placed his full trust in us. Renee chose her words to comfort the girl, but inwardly she chuckled, knowing full well the one the Overlord truly trusted was her, not this kid. Being young Agria was indeed fooled by the other woman's sweet talk. Just thinking about her idol trusting her made the girl immediately energized. Renee leisurely sipped a cup of tea. I must stay focused at all times because we never know when the humans might attack. Immediately, Agria used her magic, the Observer's Eye, to scout around the dungeon. Renee was very pleased to have another assistant. Apprentice helping her out here. She was just about to tidy up when Agria's expression suddenly changed. The Observer's Eye had reacted. It seemed an intruder had truly arrived. But the reaction wasn't very large, so it was likely just a single intruder.
Please get ready, Agria.
Renee stood up tense. They're here. Just as Agria drew her weapon, a blinding red light flashed, accompanied by the sound of high-heeled shoes clicking against the floor and the seductive laugh of a woman.
Oh my, why are you two so panicked?
A woman slowly appeared from the entrance, her beautiful face, porcelain white skin, and fiery figure. Could it be Lady Erzabet Bathory, the master of the Iron Castle dungeon, and no one else? This unexpected visit from Erzabet made Renee extremely awkward because Deverall was not here, so she hadn't prepared many delicacies to treat her guest. Erzabet acted generous, saying she didn't mind such matters, and if Renee really wanted to prepare something delicious, she could offer her some of her own blood. You're joking again. Renee gave a stiff smile. Erzabet stopped her teasing, turning toward Agria with an interested expression. Who is this, a newcomer? Before Renee could answer, Agria spoke up with a boastful tone. It seemed the girl was always very confident about her Demon King heritage. You want to ask about the great me, huh? I am the Demon King, ruler of the demons, the 17th descendant of Asmodeus Melia de Lymph Agria, Erzabet Bathory. Watching Agria's pompous display, Erzabet found it quite amusing. Young people really are interesting. After hearing Renee introduce the identity of the lady before her, Agria immediately stopped puffing her chest out. She pulled Renee to the side, then cautiously whispered, Miss Renee, what if I just live here forever? Yeah, we can probably meet them. The boss of all others dungeons obviously isn't too thrilled about Agria crashing on the couch here. After all, Devarro hasn't actually given her the green light to become an official member of the ancient core yet. Erzberg, lounging around lazily, orders a bat to come pour her some tea. It flaps its wings twice and instantly transforms into a handsome guy. At your service, my lady. Mentioning Devarro reminds Erzberg that she hasn't seen him or Patrick around for a while. Renee honestly replies that they left a good while ago. Erzberg's expression darkens immediately. She didn't expect them to be gone at a time like this. Seeing the vampire lady's look, Renee gets nervous too. And from Erzberg's own mouth, she gets a rough idea of what's going on out there. The villages near the castle have been completely wiped out. The humans there are probably all goners. But the strange thing is, they couldn't find a single body there, just a sea of blood. Erzberg doesn't think it was a human-led massacre because the blood on the ground all flows in one direction like it's carving out a path, and the final destination of that path is none other than Hastin. Agria, hearing something this bizarre for the first time, listens intently. If all the bodies have vanished, then there's a high chance they've turned into undead. Erzberg doesn't rule that out, but there aren't many who have the power to pull that off. Most undead lack intelligence, but those who do are specifically dubbed elders. And at higher levels, if an undead army moves in a pack, it means someone is pulling the strings behind the scenes. At this point, one name has already crossed Erzberg's mind, the Lord of the Undead, the immortal King Ervos. He's the prime suspect. That's why the vampire lady came to the ancient core today. She wanted to bring this news to Devarro and discuss it together. But right now the dungeon is empty. Renee doesn't even have a single monster left capable of sending a message. Erzberg is speechless. How could she trust a fool like Deverall? unconditionally enough to let him go off on his own without a way to communicate. Agria, who had been silent until now, speaks up enthusiastically. Isn't it time for this great me to step in? There's no other choice, so I guess that's the way it has to be. Back to Haston. Deverall is currently immersed in Tot's tragic story. According to him, the Black Blight was the root of everything not long after it spread to Haston. Someone set the fields on fire. Because the flames spread so fast, the crops that were just waiting to be harvested turned to ash in an instant. Around that same time, a vicious rumor began to spread through the village. People whispered that the food in areas hit by the Black Blight was infected, and as soon as you ate it, you'd be plagued by agonizing pain. Haston, just like that, became a cursed land. When people heard whispers that even the Emperor had abandoned this place, everyone fell into despair. But even in that despair, a flicker of hope remained. A wealthy, kind-hearted couple stood up to help the villagers. The fire didn't affect their crops as much. Those of that couple, they opened their grain storage and distributed it to the people. Many saw them as a shining example and followed suit, helping one another. Just as faith was being replanted, someone found the blood-drenched bodies of the couple in their own home. People speculated that some greedy person wanted to hoard more food and took them out. And then no one dared to trust those around them anymore. Cooperation between people shattered, and everyone started fighting tooth and nail just to keep their food from being stolen. And in the end, they all starved to death. The reason the people living in the slums like Tot could survive was actually because of that rumor about the food being infected. They took a gamble and ate the food anyway. And up to this point, they've all been fine. Even with his eyes closed, Deverall could guess that this rumor was spread by someone with malicious intent. Tot leads Deverall to the next location. It's a graveyard, and the scene before them is terrifying piles of people who died of starvation. If they weren't disposed of, flies and vermin would swarm the whole town, so the survivors had dug a massive pit and piled the corpses up like this. Don't you guys feel bad about this? Deverall wonders aloud. Among those who lost their families, there are still many who can't let go. If you want to be honest, no one really wants to take on this troublesome burden that's more like it. Tot reveals one more secret. The couple he mentioned earlier had a daughter, and that child is Rosalina. Deverall sighs. Going from a high-born princess to a homeless orphan, that kid's fate really is miserable. He scans his surroundings and spots two guards. According to Tot, they are the ones controlling this place. In a situation like this, having guards controlling the gates, Deverall immediately guesses they are working under the Lord's orders. The Lord of this land is highly suspicious, he thinks. He should meet them face to face to make a breakthrough. Using normal methods won't reveal the schemes of those pulling the strings. With that goal, Patrick came up with a plan. That was he stole some happy eggs. If they chase after this egg and Deverall can defeat them all, he'd have an excuse to meet the Lord. But the Lord is nowhere to be seen. And the swarm of happies coming for their eggs is so massive it's dizzying. Patrick, who was calling himself a genius a second ago, is now feeling lightheaded a second later, not expecting this many of them to show up. At the Haston Castle, the Lord just woke up from a nightmare. She is Lala Cineria Itak, the newly appointed Lord. Lala stepped onto the balcony to catch a breath of fresh air, even though she had inherited this title weeks ago. Yet she still couldn't adapt to it. The young lady still couldn't stop thinking about the day her brother passed away. The rest of her family had fled with the fortune without even trying to restore Haston. Now Lala was struggling in anxiety, knowing there was only one way to survive. That was to rebuild Haston. But the only thing she could do was trust a mysterious man. He promised the lady he would save Haston, but looking at the current state of the territory, Lala couldn't stay calm. Take a look, is this the salvation you were talking about? Facing the young lady's questioning, the hooded man calmly replied that he would not break his promise. Before long, I will settle all the difficulties that the people of Haston are facing, so you don't need to worry too much, my lady. Lala was extremely annoyed. This stranger would never reveal the specific details of his plan. But she was just a young girl with no strategy to deal with the situation at hand. Right now, aside from trusting him, she had no other choice. According to the man, the plan to save Haston was going very smoothly, but hidden under that hood was a cunning smile that Lala couldn't see. Fine, whatever. I will trust you and wait a little longer. The young lady had no choice but to compromise with him. Just then, her butler entered and said there was a report regarding the security of Haston. She recounted the guard's story that the territory had been attacked by a group of harpies, but a knight had suddenly appeared and stopped them with just one strike. Lala was shocked when she heard this. Just one strike. Who is he? Which knight order does he belong to? The butler reported that the guards had asked, but received no answer. Lala was anxious to speak with that mysterious knight herself. She wanted to go to the guest reception room in the castle where the butler had arranged for the visitor to wait, but the mysterious man stopped her. He suggested it was possible that the knight was an assassin in disguise, but Lala couldn't deny the person's contribution to helping Hastin just because he was suspicious. She believed that rewarding his service was something a lady of Hastin should do. Eventually, Lala decided to let the knight have an audience. Patrick was brought before Lala. He gracefully knelt on one knee and introduced himself. Lala was extremely grateful for Patrick's act of protecting the territory, not knowing that this was his and Diva's plan. Patrick observed the person in front of him. With just one look, he already knew she wasn't fit to be a lady. Based on her age, Patrick could guess. Lala, the younger sister of the former lord. Which family do you serve as a knight? Patrick didn't know how to answer. The atmosphere suddenly fell into a deathly silence. Lala asked for Patrick's name again, but he apologized, saying he couldn't reveal it either. You're hiding quite a lot, aren't you? If I asked you to take off your helmet, would you refuse that too? My face is full of scars from battle and half of it has been slashed away. But if you can accept that my lady, I will take off my helmet. Sure enough, this line of talk was very effective. Lala didn't ask Patrick to remove his helmet anymore. However, she still kept her intention to reward him. Lala asked if there was anything he needed. Patrick immediately replied that he wanted food. The most important thing in Hastin right now was grain. Through the lady's response, he could tell the current state of the castle. Very well, that's not difficult at all. Go and prepare it quickly. Lala ordered her servants. She replied without even thinking. From that, Patrick could easily see that the castle was not lacking in food at all. So why did this lady let her own people fall into such dire straits? Furthermore, Patrick was very wary of the man with the covered face standing next to her. Because he was also an undead, he could sense dark energy. That guy made Patrick feel a very familiar sensation. And so Patrick took the risk of asking Lala a question. My lady, may I ask you one question? What is it? There is something that has been bothering me for a while now. That guy. Who is he? This question was truly intrusive, and it could have gotten Patrick into trouble, but he said he only asked out of curiosity, so the young lady let him go, and now, Patrick was reporting the situation to his lazy master. And you just let him go. If you felt something familiar, isn't he undead? Do you want me to go there and fight him, or what? Patrick said he wasn't sure if he was an undead, or not, because the one bringing that aura could also be a necromancer. A human using dark magic can also radiate the energy of an undead, you know. Where do you have the time to overthink things like that? If it were me, I would have dealt with him on the spot. Devara acted impatient. We came here to clean up the mess you caused, not to cause more trouble. Patrick gritted his teeth and roughly gave Devara a hit. My lord, if you keep acting like this, you'll be out of a job sooner or later. Devara then changed the subject by mentioning what he had gathered today. It was about the food curse. Places hit by the Black Disaster become infected with a plague, and people die of starvation because they refuse to eat this food. As for the girl Rosalina, Devara couldn't get near her. Every time I try to get close, she just bolts. If only I had some kind of mind control magic, that would be perfect. I should have brought Agria along. Patrick sighed. Deverall gritted his teeth. Kang, why didn't you just say that at the beginning? And you dragged me along too, even though I didn't want to come here in the first place. That's because I didn't think the Overlord would be this useless, okay? Of course, Patrick couldn't actually say that out loud. But there was still a way to get on Rosalina's good side. He pulled out a bag of rations he'd just received from the Lord. Devar's eyes lit up at the sight. I'm starving. You want to eat and then talk about it? Patrick was speechless. Obviously not. Let's use this to win Rosalina's trust. Devara reluctantly followed Patrick's lead. He carried the bag of food to find Rosalina, but with the Hell Lord's naturally unpleasant resting face, it of course scared the poor girl to death. Rosalina pressed herself against the wall, her thin body trembling uncontrollably. My lord, did you need me for something? Why are you so surprised, kid? Do I look like I'm about to slaughter you or something? Exactly that, my lord. Just as Rosalina thought she was about to get a beating, Devar pulled a pastry from the bag. Here, take it. Let's eat together. The girl went from terrified to surprised, and then from surprised to overjoyed. Isn't this the holy bread from the priest? Rosalina excitedly grabbed Devar's hand, shaking it back and forth. It really is the priest's bread. Devar was confused. This was the bread Patrick gave him. And what's this about a priest? To answer Devar's confusion, Rosalina led him to a cave near the village. She seemed happy to have finally found someone who shared her faith. No one else around her would believe her. They stopped in front of a large, pitch-black cave, but torches lit up as they walked further in. They kept going. Deep down, they encountered a man who was known as the priest. He was passionately preaching, "The disaster that befell Hastin is a trial for humanity because of the evil deeds they have committed, and he is one, a powerful being who can overcome our current circumstances. As his loyal followers, we should be praised as the chosen ones." Rosalina found a spot for the two of them to sit. Deverall felt a bit annoyed just listening to it, but the priest didn't look like anything special. Was he just some guy specializing in brainwashing like a cult leader? While he was lost in thought, the followers around them stood up in unison. Rosalina was smiling so wide her eyes were squinting. She said it looked like they had arrived at the perfect time. Now was the rite of Holy Communion, the moment the priest handed out the holy bread to the believers. Devar used his keen owl-like eyes to observe. The bread looked exactly like the one Patrick had received from the Lord of Hastin. So why would something like that be in the Lord's castle? In other words, this guy was getting those pastries from inside the castle. Devara hadn't found the answer yet, but suddenly Rosalina leaned in and whispered in his ear, "Sir Knight, let me share a secret just with you. When he comes to save Hastin, I heard that those who truly believe in him will be granted eternal happiness." No matter how Devara looked at it, it sounded like absolute nonsense. But Rosalina gripped the cross in her hand tight, dreaming of receiving the blessings that he would bestow. Before the two of them could finish their conversation, the priest approached them. "You've come today as well, child. Rosalina here is today's blessing. Make sure to hold on to it tight." Rosalina thanked him profusely for the bread. The priest continued on to Devar and offered him a similar pastry. When Devar reached out to take it, he confirmed his intuition had been right all along. The pastry in his hand fell to the ground and crumbled into pieces. Devara wore a more terrifying expression than ever before. He grabbed the priest by the shoulders and whispered in his ear, "You're standing right in front of me, and you're still trying to pull this scam? Humans can't see that mana flow, but that trick won't work on me. I don't care what you do with these humans, but stop trying to probe me. You've crossed the line." The priest's expression shifted to pure disbelief. He finally realized the man before him was not human. Rosalina stood by clutching her bread, looking completely bewildered. "Is something wrong, Sir Knight?" Devar let go of the priest, his expression returning to normal. He told Rosalina he was just thanking the priest for giving them food. Rosalina believed him blindly. The two returned to the village late at night. After saying goodbye to the girl, Devar's face darkened again. There were too many suspicious things. He probably didn't even need concrete evidence anymore. That cult leader had come to the isolated land of Hastin. He was using mana of unknown origin to brainwash and monitor the people here. Combined with that guy radiating undead energy standing next to the Lord that Patrick met earlier today, they were definitely connected, and not only that, but behind them, there must be someone else pulling the strings. "Whoa, how do you know that?" As expected of the great Lord Devar, Agria suddenly appeared at his side, acting all lovesick. It turned out that because he was so lost in thought, Devar had unconsciously spoken his musings out loud. But the problem was, why did this annoying girl have to show up in Hastin? Devara thought he was hallucinating. Now the headache he had to deal with had just doubled. "My lord, you said you destroyed it, so I was just wondering how bad it would get. Not a bad view from up here, huh?" Agria perched precariously on the roof of a high-rise, scanning the entire village of Hastin. Surely this annoying little brat didn't come all this way just out of curiosity. "Just wanted to see how Hastin is doing." Agria answered honestly about Lady Beatrice's visit to the ancient core, and recounted everything she'd found, including the traces of strange abnormal phenomena. All signs around the castle pointed toward Hastin, and the person Beatrice suspected most was Ervos. Ervos was without a doubt the most likely culprit, but that was just a theory after all. Deverall commented listlessly, "Honestly, on the way here, Agria had already put a lot of thought into this. The current state of Hastin was far from good, even though no zombies had appeared yet. Agria suspected the bastard behind this was manipulating the mana flow. She slammed her staff straight into the ground and cast a low-level detection spell. "I knew it! Just as I predicted. The believers in Hastin would never, ever imagine that the priest they trusted with their lives was actually a zombie? Not only that, he was a grave warden, a gatekeeper for the lands of the dead. His full name was Lich Simon Magus. Today, as usual, Magus was reporting on the situation in Hoston to the one he served, and just as Lady Beatrice had suspected, the one behind it all was Ervos, the lord of all undead. The lowly Magus knelt at Ervos's feet. This will be the final report before I head to Haston myself. Speak your piece. My lord, there is an unexpected intruder. Ervos wasn't very surprised. The mysterious man named Omo, who always hovered by the lord's side, had already reported it. The person you met must have been wearing white armor and radiating the stench of death, right? Magus shook his head. No, the one I faced was Deverall. He wasn't wearing armor. And he didn't radiate the stench of death. Magus didn't know the opponent's identity, but he was certain that person had a connection to the deep darkness. Ervos fell into a 5-second silence. He began to doubt this person's identity. But even if Deverall or Patrick showed up, he was determined to seize control of Haston. It was the first step in his plan to conquer the Empire. That guy Omo had demanded Ervos send reinforcements to the Lord's castle, so he had sent another lackey named Massam to the dungeon. Incidentally, he asked Magus if he needed more troops to deal with Deverall. No, Magus refused. If I feel it is necessary later, I will send a request for reinforcements, my lord. Suit yourself. Ervos replied indifferently, then vanished. Magus stood up slowly, watching the ravens fly off with his master. He thought to himself, soon, and the undead will rule everything on this earth. No matter who showed up, there was no stopping them now. But Magus still had one lingering worry that that monster would come here and ruin everything. As for the monster and his nightmares, whether it was Deverall or not, the next chapter would make it clear. Meanwhile, Deverall was still lying lazily on the roof, bossing Agria around. The girl was certain someone was manipulating the mana flow in Hoston, but she had no way to know for sure. Who was casting the spell? However, for most large-scale magic like this, the caster usually had to be nearby to maintain a constant mana flow, or he could use a catalyst to guide the mana stably. And a catalyst capable of sustaining a large-scale spell covering all of Hastine would definitely require a massive amount of mana. And according to Agria's deduction, the most suitable place to hide that catalyst was the Lord's castle. Deverall yawned. He found Agria's reasoning perfectly sound. Even though he didn't know what the other side was planning, if Deverall and his crew started tearing everything apart now, someone would surely come to investigate. Coincidentally, Patrick was nearby too. Deverall decided to stop being lazy. Hey, Agria, you're free, right? Then come to the castle with me. The look in Deverall's eyes and his expression startled Agria. She didn't know what he was thinking, but according to Lord Deverall, it was time to replace one of the grave wardens. At that same moment, Patrick was searching the entire castle. Just as he'd suspected, the area beneath the castle was the most suspicious spot. Patrick's nose, sharp as a dog's, had picked up a putrid stench of rotting corpses, wafting up from below. There was a dungeon under the castle that served no purpose, but Patrick heard a very suspicious sound. Sure enough, his hunch was right. When he crept down there, he bumped into a giant monster chopping up remains. The massive butcher's knife in the beast's hand was quite impressive. It had been a long time since Patrick had seen such a crude weapon. Seeing the opponent so engrossed in his work, Patrick spoke up first. Sorry to interrupt your work, buddy. Who's your master? The butcher, seeing someone had arrived, panicked and spun around. He swung that giant cleaver at Patrick. Given his massive frame, the blow carried a ton of force. But for Patrick, the speed was far too slow. He easily caught the massive blade with one hand. So something like this is happening in the castle dungeon. That means that bastard and the Lord are in on it together, huh? Patrick put a little more strength into his grip and snapped the giant blade in half. Before his opponent could even process what was happening, Patrick had already gripped the man's jaw tight. Since we've confirmed what you are, get lost. Clearly this jerk was no match for Patrick. He easily sliced the guy in two with a single strike, but then the torches in the dungeon flickered out and flared back up with magical fire. Patrick was on high alert, but a split second later, his helmet was blown right off. Patrick chuckled dryly. Well, that's a surprise. A Dullahan shows up too. Just what kind of plan are you people cooking up? For those who don't know, a Dullahan is a headless knight. Hey you, under whose orders are you guarding this place? Patrick asked politely, but the opponent didn't want to talk. Instead, he lunged forward rudely. While dodging, Patrick recognized the weapon in his hand. That blade was a cursed sword. It could corrode any weapon it touched, so dealing with it wouldn't be easy. Even Patrick admitted this guy was no pushover. He wasn't some run-of-the-mill headless knight. After all, they were both undead. "Why don't we sit down and have a chat?" Patrick tried to persuade him, but it was obvious. That request was utterly pointless. The Dullahan completely ignored the invitation. He charged at Patrick again, forcing the big guy to shift his body backward to dodge the blade. This bastard was clearly an undead with actual intelligence, but he refused to open his mouth. Patrick swore he would find out why he was here, and he believed that young Lord could answer his questions. Since that was the case, Patrick didn't want to waste any more time. He unleashed a barrage of attacks to overwhelm his opponent. That Dullahan might have been strong, but he wasn't on Patrick's level. Even the cursed sword in his hand was snatched away by Patrick. Under Patrick's relentless assault, his opponent was sliced into several pieces. At midnight, Lord Lala woke up because the temperature suddenly dropped. The moment she opened her eyes, she saw a towering figure standing right in front of her bed, radiating a bone-chilling aura. The young lord immediately went on edge. "How dare you break in here in the middle of the night? Isn't it obvious? Because I have something to discuss with you. Your name is Lala, right?" Patrick calmly drew his sword, sending the lord into a panic. He gave her exactly 5 minutes to call for Omo. Naturally, Lala didn't have the guts to disobey Patrick, so that man whose face was always hidden was summoned in the dead of night. "Apologies for calling you all here so late, but while I was out for a midnight stroll, I happened to pick this up." Patrick roughly tossed the object onto the table. Lord Lala jumped in fear, but it seemed she had no idea what it was. "This is the helmet of a Dullahan. It's the very head of the opponent that I just took down." Patrick bluntly confronted Lala. "Why are you collaborating with the undead? What are you talking about?" "What undead?" Patrick assumed she was still trying to play the part, or if she wasn't acting, she honestly had no idea what kind of people she was shaking hands with. That wouldn't be surprising, as Patrick had seen that Lala was just an incompetent lord who didn't even know what was happening on her own land. "My lord, you don't need to listen to these baseless accusations anymore." That man finally spoke up. He wanted to order the soldiers to arrest Patrick on the lord's behalf, but Patrick didn't even give him a chance to finish. "I personally took care of that Dullahan in the dungeon beneath this castle." Hearing the words, "dungeon beneath the castle?" Lala turned to look at the subordinate whose face she had never seen. Clearly he was feeling guilty. The proof was how he hurriedly looked away when he met her gaze. "That's right. There are countless corpses in your underground dungeon." Patrick coldly drew his sword again and pointed it directly at that man. "Let me give you another hint. The guy standing next to you is also an undead. Perhaps due to extreme stress, the young lord's words and actions became erratic. She chose not to believe Patrick, who had only recently appeared in the castle. Instead, she trusted the person standing right next to her, someone who always acted mysterious but promised he would save Haston. Lala figured that if Patrick kept insisting on calling him an undead, then he was the one threatening the safety of all of Haston. Patrick let out a few dry chuckles. This lord was stupid to the point of being laughable. It was clear that deep down she already suspected who the real threat to Haston was, yet she was still acting tough. At this point, Omo didn't even feel ashamed as he stepped toward Patrick, advising both him and Lala to calm down. "Sir Knight, you said earlier that this was a Dullahan's helmet, but Dullahans aren't that easy to run into, are they? You feel the same, don't you?" I was surprised, too. I couldn't believe my own eyes. A high-level undead like that appearing in a place like this. Patrick feigned interest, playing along with that bastard's act perfectly. Above all, Patrick felt that the Dullahan was a bit strange. Given its rank, it should have been considered an elder among the undead, so it really ought to have had enough intelligence to speak. But throughout the entire fight, it didn't open its mouth once. The way it moved in battle wasn't normal either, so after burning its soul, Patrick did a quick check, and here is what he found. He discovered a mind control magic circle hidden inside its armor right next to the name of its master. The name of that Dullahan was Masam. This seems to be the name of the vice-captain of the raiding party, the Masam and Hada brothers, a unit that was assembled to take down a rampaging undead 35 years ago. Rumor had it he was a fairly powerful knight, but after that raid ended, he just vanished. Patrick turned back toward Lala, who was still standing there, stunned and questioning. "Do you have any idea who that rampaging undead they were trying to take down might have been?" Lala obviously didn't know the answer, and Patrick had already guessed that. So the blade in his hand shifted once more, pointing straight at the hooded figure. "Well then, let me ask you a different question this time. I hope you can answer this one yourself. Where is that rampaging undead Arrow Voss? Tell me, you pathetic undead lackey. Hearing the name Arrow Voss, Lord Lala became even more confused. She had no idea why that cruel and ruthless dungeon boss was involved in this. Meanwhile, that Omo guy burst into insane laughter even with Patrick's blade pressed against his throat. That laughter seemed to snap the young lord out of her daze. She screamed wildly at him, desperately clinging to a final shred of hope. Didn't you say you would save me and my territory? Oh, of course I did. This was the first time Lala had seen this bastard's true face, and the terrifying expression on him made her too afraid to say another word. Patrick's arrival had completely derailed Omo's plans. He didn't bother hiding his murderous intent anymore. After all, there was no turning back for him now. Thinking that Omo reached out toward the young lord, but before he could even touch her, his arm was cleanly severed by Patrick's swift blade. "Stay still," Patrick ordered. One of Omo's arms had been cut off, but not a single drop of blood came out. Lala collapsed, distraught. This sight was like a final confirmation that the man she had trusted all this time was in fact an undead. For the first time, Omo took off his hood, no longer caring about hiding his identity or his plans leaving Lala. Completely disillusioned. "I'm going to send you to the grave along with everyone else in this territory. I will turn this place into a land of the dead. As a human like you being granted a chance at salvation like this, you should feel honored." With every word he spoke, Omo's appearance began to shift. Finally, he revealed his true form as a hideous undead. This was only one small part of the plan of the undead lord. The undead king, Lord Arrow Voss. Patrick watched his opponent, his mind racing with thoughts. The undead are usually a race that doesn't think much. Instead, they rely on sheer numbers to fight. In other words, they win by brute force. But through Omo's words, Patrick was certain they had come up with and meticulously prepared a strategy before starting this invasion. As for Omo, he had actually been keeping an eye on Patrick since the very first time they met, reporting it straight to Arrow Voss. But he had even exceeded his master's expectations by defeating Masam. This made Omo even more curious about the person in front of him. He was extremely puzzled as to why such a powerful undead wouldn't serve the undead king Arrow Voss. Lord Lala, standing on the sidelines, was terrified time and time again. After learning that Patrick was also an undead, her fear doubled. Patrick let out a heavy sigh. In the end, he had still been exposed by this bastard Omo. He never intended to hurt the Lord. After all, they still needed her to cooperate and take care of the territory. Now that his identity was revealed, it seemed like that cooperation might get a bit tricky. This made Patrick even more annoyed with that undead lackey. Omo reached his long arm out, claws sharp, and pointed toward Patrick, but these two were on completely different levels from the start. Patrick could have severed his other arm with his eyes closed. The cold tip of his sword pointed straight at Omo's chest. "It's best if you listen to my orders." The opponent was a stubborn one, too. He felt that these threats from Patrick were ridiculous and completely ineffective against an undead. Of course, he understood that logic as well. Someone who has been dead for ages, why would they be afraid of dying again? Therefore, Patrick switched to a different way of threatening him, one that would be enough to make him afraid. "If you've done your research, then you must know that the person traveling with me is much stronger than you think. Strong enough that he could easily ruin your plans. How interesting. That would affect the humans too, wouldn't it? Oh, sorry about that, but we're on the humans' side." During their war of words, Patrick didn't forget to butter up the young lord a little. "Instead of wasting time like this, you should just explain everything." Of course, the thing that Patrick wanted to hear most was Arrow Voss's plan. Omo thought for a long time, not revealing his true motives, but he decided to tell him a few things. First, he revealed the method for becoming an elder. Whether a human or an undead, to become an elder, one needs to witness a supernatural phenomenon that is extremely rare or have an amount of hatred so great that it transcends that phenomenon. The reason they are called elders is that each one possesses enough power to fight off 1,000 zombies. The undead king Arrow Voss, whom he worships, is a powerful being who can use magic to create such elders. That is also the reason they isolated Haston and created a cult. They need humans with living bodies and beating hearts, but with souls that are truly weak. That's also why they isolated Haston and started a cult. They needed people with living bodies and beating hearts, but whose souls were weak enough to break. That's the perfect place for the undead to gather and for an elder to be born underground. Lala couldn't stop trembling as she heard Omo's plan. She now realized she was truly the Most foolish person in the world for having trusted that bastard's words. The Erebos' goal wasn't just to isolate Haston. Above all, they wanted to create as many elders as possible from the sea of corpses in that dungeon. And from there they would go even further to destroy the Oa Empire.
How wicked, Patrick commented honestly. If the Empire falls and all humans turn into the undead, then those who gain immense power would likely become the 7 dark prisons. Omo suddenly laughed like a madman, then began muttering a spell, and a magic circle formed. This was high-level magic, a dark curse expansion. Lala shrank back in fear, but Omo became even more smug. You think that just because you cut off my 2 hands, I can't cast spells anymore? How stupid. Well, you're pretty good. Being able to cast spells just by using words. Patrick nodded in agreement. Omo laughed out loud once more as invisible hands created from his dark curse kept wrapping around Patrick. Omo was convinced he had this match in the bag, because there was no existence that could resist his supreme Erebos lord. The only existence capable of that was the ancient monster. But Omo thought that after the teleportation, that monster had fallen into a deep sleep. Therefore, no one could stop their plans anymore. Talking so much is deafening. Patrick slowly used his primordial power to break the binds created by that dark curse. This left Omo in a state of confusion once again. Just how strong was his opponent to be able to crush a forbidden seal just by using raw power? On Patrick's side, after summarizing Omo's ramblings, he had also drawn one important conclusion. That is, no matter how grand the Erebos' plan is, when the ancient monster appears, it will all vanish like smoke. Suddenly, the ceiling of the castle exploded with a bang. Rocks and debris fell clattering to the ground. Patrick sighed deeply. This person always brings a mountain of trouble whenever he shows up. Seriously, you picked a great time to arrive, Lord. Lala coughed, her anxiety spiking even further when 2 more figures suddenly appeared in the grand hall, and their method of arrival was even more earth-shattering than Patrick's. Devara glanced at her coldly for a few seconds before turning back to Patrick. How much have you found out? Basically, I figured everything out, my lord. While Devara was slowly observing everything around him, a burst of dark energy came whistling toward him. He didn't even bother to look directly, waving his hand to deflect that blast of magic. This wave increased the power of the attack several times over, turning it into countless spikes that pierced through Omo's body. He was terrified. This power was completely beyond his imagination. Patrick chuckled with satisfaction when he saw his opponent's ugly expression. Didn't I tell you that the person with me is much stronger than you think? Devara looked at Omo as if he were looking at a pile of trash. What is this? Omo tried to control himself as he shook uncontrollably. He had vaguely realized the identity of the person in front of him. It was highly likely that Devara was the ancient monster, the only existence that his Erebos lord had to be wary of. But surely no news of their plan had leaked out. So how could Devara have found his way here? Moreover, Omo could no longer sense the energy of the stone. That was on the upper floor of the castle. At the same time, he had also probed the energy of the person standing next to Devara, and he was quite certain that Agria was a demon king. In the current situation, Omo was certain he couldn't beat them. He could only try to stall for time as long as possible, and report this news to Erebos. Thinking this, Omo forced himself to calm down. Ancient monster, why have you come here? I heard that you disappeared after the incident in... Before Omo could finish his sentence, a blinding light struck him in the face, followed by another earth-shaking scene. That bastard was beaten until he was flattened against the ground. Agria couldn't stand the other's loose mouth. The scepter in her hand rose as magic swirled, continuously burning Omo's body. Devara lazily kept yawning. It's truly surprising that the bastard can still cackle after being beaten to a pulp like that. Perhaps because he's an undead, his will is tougher than a normal person's. Kneel at your lord's feet. Our lord has set foot on this land, Omo shouted with his remaining strength. Patrick looked wary and warned Devara. He clicked his tongue. That bastard. Even his manifestation is disgustingly flashy. The people of Haston at this moment also began to feel that the sky was looking a bit strange. Rosalina had just run back as fast as she could from the Jabez Square, a place no one bothered with anymore due to the plague. As usual, the kid was nabbed by Tot. She thought she was going to get scolded again, but today Tot just sighed deeply. The band of thieves had just held a meeting. Their leader and the other members had made a decision that tomorrow night all of them would leave Haston together.
Rosalina was stunned for a few seconds. It seemed their leader didn't trust Devara and Patrick, which led to this decision. "Follow me, I'll explain it to you on the way." Tot brought Rosalina to that mass grave. The girl's parents were buried deep at the bottom of this pit. They were about to leave, and it would be a very long time before they could return if ever so Tot wanted to bring her here to say goodbye to her parents. Of course, they didn't force Rosalina to follow them. The choice was hers. Tot said she could do whatever she wanted. Rosalina was silent for a long time. She didn't understand why her leader wanted to leave Haston. "Tot won't Haston be saved. Can't we wait just a little longer?" "Rosalina, I'm not going to try and convince you anymore because you've already chosen to believe in that cult. But you want to wait for a salvation that might never come while your parents are trapped in that dark abyss." Tot's words were a bit blunt, but they were the cold, hard truth. Rosalina was placing all her faith in that cult. Yet Tot believed that the god she worshipped wasn't the only one capable of offering salvation. In fact, the things you do could actually bring salvation to those unfortunate souls. Tot's words suddenly snapped Rosalina out of it. She clenched her hands into fists. Her gaze became strangely clear. Tot was right as long as she stopped being so stubborn and took action. She herself could become their salvation. Thinking this, Rosalina took the torch from Tot's hand and looked at the pile of corpses carefully once more. Then she reached out to use the torch to free their poor bodies, but Rosalina's hand was blocked by another. "Oh my, I was just wondering, who would be coming here this late?" Tot jumped in surprise, his alertness instantly spiking. "Is that you, Rosalina?" Rosalina looked up. Standing before her was the priest, the messenger of the gods she had trusted all this time. Of course, Rosalina didn't know he was actually Margos the Dungeon Master, the lackey of the one who brought Haston to this state. "Father, what are you doing?" Rosalina began to panic as Margos gripped her arm tighter and tighter. Even when the flames from the torch spread to his hand, he didn't even bother to put the fire out. With a flick of his arm, he sent little Rosalina flying. Tot quickly rushed to catch her. The fire spread rapidly, burning away Margos's robes. This revealed his true form, the face of an undead creature. It certainly wasn't a pretty sight. Rosalina was stunned. The priest she had always trusted was an undead monster. "Shut your mouth, you pathetic human," Margos growled impatiently. "You should stay silent and prepare to welcome his arrival." Margos raised his hand, and at his gesture, the corpses in the pit began to stir. Rosalina gasped in horror. Everyone, including her parents, had turned into the living dead. "Damn it! What are you standing there for? Run!" Tot's shout snapped the girl back to reality. The two of them scrambled for their lives, with a ferocious horde of undead chasing wildly behind them. They darted into a house in town. Tot used every piece of furniture he could find to barricade the door. This should be enough to stop them, he thought, even if it was just for a little while. Rosalina was exhausted. Her legs felt like lead. Tot told her to climb onto his back, even though he was completely spent himself. He carried her up to the second floor. Through the window, they could see the undead lurking on the street below. Tot was deeply worried. He didn't even know what their chances of survival were. They crawled up to the second floor. The stench here was just as repulsive as there were more corpses in this room. Tot set Rosalina down in a corner. It was just as dangerous here as it was outside. If you want to survive, you have to be alert. Saying that, Tot walked toward a corpse and grabbed the weapon from its hand. His expression turned deadly serious. Tot walked toward Rosalina with the weapon in hand. The girl trembled. "Uncle Tot, what are you doing?" Tot didn't say a word. He swung the weapon forward. Rosalina thought she was finished. But when she opened her eyes, she wasn't even scratched. This weapon and her absurd faith had been getting on his nerves for a long time. "At least warn me before you do that." "You scared the life out of me," Rosalina shouted, reproaching him. Just then a loud crash echoed from downstairs. Their hair stood on end. The undead had broken through the door. Tot grabbed his weapon and stood up. Rosalina didn't want to be useless, so she scanned the room looking for something to fight with. But Tot wouldn't give her the chance. He looked back at Rosalina and gave a strange smile. Then Tot walked straight out of the room and locked the door from the outside. Tot had done everything, including using blood to distract the undead so they wouldn't find Rosalina. He was going to sacrifice himself. On the other side of the door, the girl was panicking. She was terrified that Tot would leave her there. "How much longer are you going to rely on others? You've been a burden to everyone long enough." Tot said things he didn't mean, but right after, He warned Rosalina to stay absolutely silent from now on and not to make a sound. And don't do anything reckless. The undead had already made their way up. Inside, Rosalina seemed to understand. She covered her mouth tightly. Tot let out a long breath. It's fine. This is better than both of us dying. Rosalina, I'm sorry for being so harsh on you all this time. Outside, Tot began to fight the undead, while behind the door, Rosalina was choking back sobs. She didn't dare make a single sound. The fact that the sky had turned an unnatural bloody red had enraged the people of Haston. They believed it was the fault of the newly appointed lord. Because she hadn't made a single appearance, even after sitting on the throne for several weeks, they thought the sky had turned this way because heaven was unleashing its fury. As the squad charged toward the lord's castle, a scream of agony pierced the air. They all turned back at once to see a young man. Covered in blood, he was stumbling toward them. It's so dangerous, he wheezed, breathless. One of the rebels rushed forward to catch him. Checking his wounds, he recognized him as an apprentice from the magic tower. Upon closer inspection, it was clear that the young man was covered in blood, but he had no wounds of his own. So where on earth did all that blood covering him come from? The answer came quickly, for right after the boy appeared, a horde of zombies came swarming after him. Hearing them approach, the boy flew into a panic. The others had no choice but to hold him down. Hey, calm down. Everyone capable of fighting gripped their weapons tight, but the terrifying sight of the undead made them falter. In that tense moment, a white-armored knight on horseback appeared. With one swing, he cut down several zombies, declaring that these things weren't as tough as they looked. Make your choice. Run and wait for death or stand up and fight. The first to answer were those apprentices from the magic tower. When the dark calamity struck Haston, they had been away on a mission and survived. Though it was a bit late, they still wanted to contribute what they could to save this place. I'll fight too. Another person in the crowd raised their hand, and like a domino effect, the rest agreed to join the battle. The knight nodded in satisfaction. He then ordered those with strength to pick up weapons and stand on the front lines, while others formed a defensive formation. They had to protect Haston until their very last breath. Get ready, they're coming. The three apprentices charged first. The magic they unleashed created a massive explosion, blasting away a large group of zombies, which also drew the attention of the rebel leader inside the city. Damn it, what's going on out there? And where did Tot and Rosalina disappear to? He was extremely anxious. They had planned to leave Haston tonight, but now those two had vanished. However, he soon found Rosalina, who was exhausted and slumped against a wall. The moment she saw her leader, Rosalina burst into tears. Tot had told her to stay in that room, but she had been so terrified that she ran all the way here. Thank goodness I found you, leader. It's all my fault, Tot. Rosalina choked back her sobs, unable to finish the sentence. But that was enough for the leader to understand everything. Though he felt hollow inside, the leader had to pull himself together to be a pillar for the child. It's okay, he kept reassuring her. He's not that kind of person, Rosalina. It's not your fault. If it weren't for Tot, you wouldn't even be alive right now. Even so, Rosalina was devastated. She blamed herself for being so blinded by faith in the Magus. These weren't just ordinary zombies after all. Suddenly, she grew calm and told her leader that instead of running away, they needed reinforcements. The leader thought he heard wrong, but Rosalina was adamant. Looking him straight in the eye, she insisted again that they needed backup, and the only ones who could help them now were those two knights. Devaro and Patrick, they're probably still inside the Lord's castle. Rosalina's leader stood up, pulled out a potion, told her to drink it to regain her strength, and then run. He was a leader, even if just for a small squad in Haston, and he wouldn't allow himself to abandon his comrades fighting out there. He also couldn't let Rosalina, the one Tot had given his life to protect, fall into danger again. Therefore, he told her to finish the potion and run straight to the Lord's castle to find Patrick and Devaro. He would take responsibility for holding off the zombies with the others. Meanwhile, Patrick and Agria were watching the battle between the remnants of Hastin and the zombies from above, while Devaro, as usual, lay lazily to the side. In this life, the thing he hated most was getting involved in troublesome business. Patrick observed that the humans had a slight advantage. They weren't fighting too badly, but that defense line is going to crumble soon. After all, human strength is limited. They will exhaust themselves against those thousands of zombies. Besides, according to Omo, there's an elder hiding among the 7 zombies. The humans won't be a match for him. Seems like Air Force has prepared quite a lot, hasn't he? Should we return the favor, boss? Devaro flashed a sinister smile. Of course, he wanted to pay Air Force back, but they needed to do something else first. Thinking of this, Devarro leaped down from where he was lounging and marched straight toward the trembling Lady Lord. What was her name? Lala Sinevie Itak. She couldn't stop shaking, her words coming out in fragments. Lala, you said... All right then, I'm Devarro. Devarro crouched down to her eye level, then used his index finger to lift her chin. You want to live right? Patrick looked on confused. He found this lord too useless and hadn't intended to let her live, but Devarro had changed his mind. They couldn't control Hastin anymore, all because of those zombies. But if those zombies vanished and they had the Lord of Hastin under their thumb, then this land didn't necessarily have to be abandoned. However, Patrick didn't think much of cooperating with humans, as both he and Agria believed humans were untrustworthy and would never... Keep your mouth shut. If they learn our secret, I don't think they're all like that. Devarro stood up indifferent. I believe this human has a reason to be kept alive. Devar noticed that even though she was terrified, she didn't flinch or look away from his gaze just now. He had revealed his true form, but Lala seemed to hold her ground. Perhaps she wasn't as useless as she looked. The heroes Deverell had met always possessed something special, something that couldn't be gained just through effort, and this woman had a spirit strong enough to face Lord Deverell himself, so he decided to trust his intuition and spare her life. Patrick sighed heavily. If the boss was that determined, it was pointless for him to object, and if everything went off the rails, he could just let the Lord deal with the consequences himself. Patrick turned away, exasperated, and Devar turned back to Lala. Now the choice is yours. Say, please save us, and everything will be settled. Sounds like a sweet deal, right? But the Lord had already been tricked by Omo once, so he seemed quite cautious. If I beg you, what happens after? Simple, the undead will be driven off. Driven. And until Hastin regains its peace, Patrick will do his best to help. Patrick jumped like a cat splashed with boiling water and immediately shouted, Boss, are you exploiting me? That's too much. It was obviously the boss's own plan, yet he was forcing him to carry it out. Devar quickly tried to brush it off. Honestly, he was just too lazy to get involved. He could plan it out, but doing the legwork was out of the question. As for Lala, she knew that if she asked for help from the person in front of her, she would have to pay a price. What Devar wanted was for her to hand over everything she had. Naturally, that included her power. Lala was incredibly tense. The pressure from the three people before her especially, that Lord, was immense. She knew she would definitely die if she dared to refuse. Whether she died at the hands of this monster in human skin, or was torn apart by the undead, it was still death. But if she accepted Devar's demand, she would survive, even if she lost everything. In Lala's mind, a flurry of questions began to emerge. If the black disaster hadn't appeared, would her brother have committed suicide? If he were still alive, would she have been able to become the Lady of Hastin? If she wasn't the Lady of Hastin, would she even have to face this situation? Lala struggled intensely with her thoughts, stuttering, unable to force out an answer. Conversely, Patrick and Devar didn't seem very patient. These two bosses just wanted to finish her off and be done with it. Now where did I put my sword? Before Lala could answer, Devar heard the sound of rapid footsteps. Someone was coming. Agria asked for his opinion on how to handle it. If Devar wanted, she could easily block the door with magic, but Devar was curious to know who was coming, so he told Agria to open the door. The moment it opened, a small figure darted in like a bullet. Devar recognized her. At a glance, it was Rosalina. The moment the child saw him, her eyes lit up. You're really here, Sir Knight. Please help us. She stopped breathlessly in front of Devar, and despite being unable to catch her breath, Rosalina still tried to recount in detail what had just happened, including the fact that the undead were swarming into the village, that everyone was trying to fight back, but they were too numerous and ferocious, that Toth was lost, and that the leader had tasked her with coming here to ask for reinforcements from Devar. Everyone is trying their best to hold on, so please help us. Didn't you say you would save Hastin? Noticing Deverell had been silent for a long time, Rosalina finally looked up, and the sight before her made her blood run cold. Right next to Deverell was nothing but a skeleton. Patrick didn't mind scaring her a little more. That's right, I'm a skeleton. Heh. Too bad, though. The current situation depends on that human's choice, he said, gesturing toward the Lord. She was still weighing the cost of survival against losing all her power. Or perhaps they'd all just kick the bucket. Suspecting humanity out there was nearing its limit, Patrick turned to ask Agria for a favor. The girl was sharp and bright. Before Patrick even finished, she understood. Agria used her magic to conjure a giant winged eye. Whoa, what is that? Deverall looked at the thing with clear disgust. That giant eye. It flapped its wings and flew out of the castle, heading straight for the intense battlefield, while those in the castle watched the events unfold in real time. Rosalina became incredibly tense, and the Lady Lord didn't look any better. Only Patrick and Deverall watched the battle with interest as if they were watching a cartoon. They didn't forget to drop a few comments every now and then. "Oh, there's a bunch of ghouls. I don't like them. They reek. Looks like they can't hold out much longer, huh?" Tears started streaming down Rosalina's small face. The people in front of her were members of the wandering bandit group who had taken her in, and she had to watch them being beaten and torn apart. She couldn't do a thing. It made her heart feel like it was about to burst. Rosalina frantically demanded to know why Deverall was just watching, even though he had the power to stop them, and then she begged him to save them. "Haston! And those innocent people!" Before Deverall could reply, Rosalina turned to the Lord. "What the hell are you doing while your people are dying out there?" I... Lala stammered, unsure how to answer in such a situation. "I asked what you are doing." Being scolded straight to her face by a child like that, Lala finally had to make a decision. She turned to Deverall, desperately begging him to save the survivors in Haston. No deal needed. The contract between them was officially established. Just waiting for that, Deverall, along with Patrick and Agria, turned and walked toward the door. "What's so hard about this? Why did you have to think about it so much?" The sky over Haston was dyed a deep red. The battle was leaning heavily toward the undead. Even the militia's strongest fighters were gradually falling. They had given everything they had to fight the enemy, but they never expected to be defeated so quickly. The white-haired man was among the last to fall, but facing the undead charging at him. He had no strength left to resist. At the moment the man closed his eyes to accept his fate, the zombie's head was suddenly crushed under a boot. Ugh, gross! Agria landed from the air in a very clumsy way. The girl had just smashed a zombie to bits and felt disgusted because her soul was covered in filth. The remaining zombies saw Agria and started to go berserk. This was the moment to reveal her Demon King aura. Too noisy. Agria frowned and flicked her hand, unleashing a swarm of purple butterflies. Everywhere the butterflies flew, the zombies were incinerated by magical flames. The girl seemed quite satisfied with her own performance just now. The white-haired man who had just been rescued by Agria couldn't help but express his gratitude. His eyes sparkled, looking as if he had just been enlightened by a holy light. "Oh, an angel!" This flowery title immediately made Agria lose her temper. She turned, glared with laser-like eyes, and gritted her teeth at the man. "You useless human, what did you just call me?" And she didn't stop there. The girl aggressively kicked him. "If you value your life, get lost." Though the man didn't understand what was going on, his life was what mattered most, so he scrambled away. Behind him, Agria was still cursing, railing against the stupid humans who dared to compare her to an angel. She hadn't expected that one day she would be helping humans. Just then, from within the flames, the undead General Margot appeared. He could sense the energy radiating from Agria and was certain she was a demon. Plus, her mana was so incredibly rich that she had to be a demon king or a dragon. That made him even more confused as to why. Agria was standing on the side of the humans. "I do it because I feel like it. What gives an undead like you the right to question me, the Demon King?" Agria didn't hold back. Her bluntness infuriated Margot. He felt the girl was too full of herself, and swore he would tear her apart to find the answer he needed. He even wanted to turn Agria into the most powerful undead of all time. As for Agria, she didn't even let Margot's words sink in, nor did she care about his status. She just felt Margot was the most long-winded and annoying zombie she had ever met. "I am a loyal servant under the Lord of all undead. How can you, Simon Margot? There is no way I'm losing to a little brat of a demon king like you." Even though nobody asked, the minister gave an answer anyway. Agria, however, wasn't all that impressed with Margot's self-introduction and just looked indifferently behind his back. "I don't know what you're babbling about, but I'm not your opponent." Margot's keen intuition instantly sensed something far more terrifying approaching. Sure enough, Devara had been lying in wait behind him the whole time. The moment Margos turned his head, he lunged forward like a storm. "Found you, you bastard! I told you I'd remember your face!" Margos's eyes widened as he looked at the person before him. His brain had barely processed who Devara was before he took a full-on punch to the face, the blow of Lord Devara. It was so powerful that his subordinate, Erebos, was sent flying a massive distance away. Even more ridiculously, the wall he slammed into shattered into pieces. Devara chuckled. The feeling of letting off some steam with that punch wasn't bad at all. Devara thought to himself if he guessed correctly, the guy who just got sent flying was the gatekeeper of the undead army, which also meant he was the gatekeeper of the 7th. Toxic hell. You shouldn't be dead after just one punch. Get up, Devara commanded impatiently. The monster subordinates of Margos could only stand to the side and tremble. Agria, meanwhile, was enthusiastically watching the show, finding it fun to see such a tough guy get blown away by just one punch from Devara. Furthermore, it seemed that just now, he didn't even use his full strength, did he? She excitedly rushed toward Devara and started badgering him. Lord Devara, it seems you have a bit of a personal grudge against him. You know him. Well, Devara had intended to tell the story of the last time he went with Rosalina, how this bastard channeled mana through a holy cake to try and probe him, but it was such a long story that Devara couldn't be bothered. So he just replied briefly that he simply didn't like Margos and wanted to hit him a few more times. But it looked like that guy couldn't stand up anymore. Devara decided they shouldn't stay here any longer. Agria, do you think? Erebos is in this village. Agria shook her head and pointed to the fiery red sky. That's actually a barrier created to trap everyone inside. This means the person casting the spell is on the outside, but specifically, I don't know what he's planning to do. And Agria's strength wasn't enough to break that barrier. Devara didn't intend to overwork the girl. Anything heavy or difficult he would handle himself. Now the task Devara gave to Agria was to clean up the rest of the Ria's troops and minimize human casualties as much as possible. Although it's a bit late, Hastine still needs a stable population to keep existing. It might not be perfect, but if it's just that, then I think I can handle it. Having been given a mission directly by Devara, Agria became full of energy. Devara didn't mind patting her head and giving her a few compliments, which made her beam with joy. You did great. Then let's clean up this place a bit before we go to face Erebos directly, shall we? Leave that to me, Lord Devara. Devara left Agria with the mess while he walked straight up to Margos. This gatekeeper of the toxic hell had also partially guessed his identity. With this kind of power, he believed that Devara was the ancient monster that his lord feared most. As Devara approached, the ground suddenly lit up, revealing a magic circle. Margos burst into a horrific laugh. Ancient monster, do you think I'm stupid enough to just wait here without preparing anything? A massive explosion erupted from the magic circle. Simon Margos was blown backward, but that was exactly what he had calculated. He was a loyal servant, one of the pillars of the army under Erebos. He had never disappointed Erebos before, and Margos thought to himself that this time would be no different. Even though he was covered in wounds, he had to take this chance to return to Erebos' side. But it seemed the ancient monster in his eyes was even tougher to deal with. Devara's form was starting to change, which proved that his rage was overflowing. You stupid bastard. Looks like you just love to provoke me, don't you? Margos stood there stunned. Furious, he cursed, "Damn it, seriously!" Margos looked at the opponent who was radiating killing intent. The image of those terrifying golden eyes, the Devara of the toxic hell. He saw the situation was bad and intended to flee. Oh no, I need to get to Lord Erebos quickly. He was extremely frantic. Faster! Margos kept urging himself to go faster. Margos thought he was almost at his destination, but suddenly a beast with a strange black shape and incredibly sharp teeth tried to snap at him. But Margos's body easily dodged it. The beast was also quite surprised by his agility. It looked toward where Margos was flying in the other direction. That bastard sure runs fast. Margos also escaped into another dimension. Swallow stood below, witnessing it all. I was going to swallow him in one bite, but he got away. He scratched his head. If I waste time looking for him now, it'll be a hassle, but I can't leave him alone either. Mior was nearby, smiling warmly. Lord Devara, how long will you be gone? Swallow gave him his answer. 15 minutes or 20 minutes. I can definitely hold out for 20 minutes. Mior heard that and encouraged him. Please be careful, my lord. Swallow stopped paying attention to Melga and turned his gaze toward the house. I'm a bit worried about Melge. He lifted his hand, which was oozing a black fluid, and looked in that direction, feeling dejected. I can't waste any more time here. The fluid quickly formed a large circle with a long black trail. That bastard must have run off to my mother. Eros is probably outside the village, so... Meanwhile, Mars had already flown out into the open space. Swallow had a vague idea of what was happening. If he wants to leave, he has to hug the castle walls, right? I don't know, honestly. Mars turned around looking completely shocked, a massive surge of light, as if trying to swallow him whole. Swallow flashed a sinister smile. If I just blow everything up in this direction, I'm bound to hit that vermin. He surveyed the puddles, feeling satisfied. Looks like this will do. The basic structure of the village was still intact, and only then did Swallow calmly start walking. I can already hear Patrick's nagging voice. He muttered, wondering if he was hallucinating while walking. Swallow spotted Margus's corpse lying there. He looked at it in silence. Found the body. Wait, if you kill something that's already dead, is it still called a corpse? Swallow dragged the body along, grumbling, so gross, whatever. This village being in ruins is your fault, you know. How do you plan on taking responsibility for this? He dragged the corpse, creating a loud, scraping sound. Huh, you're telling me not to blame others. If you felt it was unfair, you should have tried harder to stay alive. If you want to explain yourself, go tell Patrick. Swallow looked ahead, so this was the barrier. He eyed it indifferently, a barrier that even with Melge's power couldn't be broken, so it seems. Swallow quickly reached out to touch the barrier. Not bad, I guess. But how much can it really take? He pushed his hand into the barrier, wincing slightly as it caused his hand to warp and deform, but he felt no pain. Instead, Swallow found it quite interesting. It's actually pretty strong. He glanced over at the corpse. I can probably get through it as long as this zombie can handle it. If this corpse gets destroyed and can't maintain its shape, Patrick. The mere thought made Swallow feel drained. He'd definitely get an earful. He made a quick decision. Fine, if anything goes wrong, I'm blaming you. It's all on you. The corpse! Suddenly, Swallow stopped moving and looked to the side. A group of corpses was beginning to approach. Right there were no humans left in this area. Swallow. Instead of going through the barrier, he dragged the corpse in the opposite direction. He stopped abruptly, his eyes turning fierce with terrifying streaks of red and white light. They kept appearing. Suddenly, a beastly figure with a long tongue appeared, flanked by fluttering black fragments. Swallow moved quickly, rushing forward. Suddenly, he launched himself high into the air with a graceful display. A massive explosion erupted, sending out waves of grayish-black streaks and debris that fluttered continuously to the ground. The zombies outside saw it all. They stood there with their jaws dropped. Swallow stepped out with a confident stride, surrounded by the undead. You guys sure have a lot of numbers, don't you? They were terrifying constantly, baring their teeth and making strange guttural noises at Swallow, reaching out with their gruesome arms to touch him. Of course, Swallow wasn't about to let that happen. He unleashed a massive burst of light, blasting the nearby zombies away. The others, standing further back, could only watch. At this moment, Swallow finally spoke up. Is this how you greet a guest? But he didn't continue. He looked at them once more with a cold expression. Truly pathetic. One of the zombies pointed toward Swallow's face as if it meant something. A sword suddenly plunged into the ground as if triggered, and the zombies quickly started moving. They were all heading in one direction. Swallow prepared himself for the fight. Yeah, I really should have done this from the start. The zombies came in various shapes, some wrapped in white bandages, some with blue flames on their bodies. 2 blue circular lights shone down. Swallow reached out a hand. Here's a gift for you. The 2 blue lights didn't seem to understand what he meant. He continued, it seems we have a lot to talk about. The 2 blue lights were actually the eyes of the zombie leader. Just now, the image of Erebos, a monster packed with others baring its teeth, appeared. Erebos sat triumphantly on his throne and whispered. An ancient monster, an image of something like a shackled mummy appeared. That was when he spoke. So you're saying it's fine to just abandon those races to be oppressed by humans? As the image of the ancient monster, shackled like a mummy, appeared, he spoke up. So you're saying it doesn't matter if we just leave those races to be oppressed by humanity? Swallow didn't want to answer, just standing there motionless as the wind blew past, but Erebos kept rambling about how humans are arrogant, rude, and selfish. Even after finding a peaceful life, they still greedily crave more, invading the lands of other races. Swallow didn't want to hear another word. You're dragging this on too long. Get to the point. Erebos, furious, spat out that humans must vanish, and that Swallow, with the power to easily wipe out the entire empire, had eyes burning with hateful fire. I once thought defeating the empire was impossible before we could ever beat Rias until I heard about the black calamity that struck Rias, Erebos said, staring at Swallow. Note: original text split across lines, merged for flow. If you would only voice the desire to wipe humanity from this continent, all the demon races would rise up ready to die for your cause. Swallow just scratched his head, looking indifferent.
Why are you rambling so much? Can't you just get to the point? Hearing that, Erebos spoke bluntly.
I'm saying that if you didn't just stand by watching, so many nobles wouldn't have had to die. We could have wiped out that lowly human scum already. Erebos kept his eyes locked on Swallow, who finally understood his point. So you're saying everything happening is my fault? Yes, Erebos agreed. You are the root of the problem. Before he could finish, Swallow, as if he understood exactly what he meant, looked at him calmly. You mean to say I should just wipe out humanity so I shouldn't get in your way? Is that it? Erebos's face twisted in dissatisfaction. How disappointing. He glanced to the side, deeply let down, when suddenly a magic circle appeared above Swallow, catching him by surprise. Erebos muttered, "It is a creation." Swallow was quite puzzled. What is that? Erebos introduced it, a foul-smelling creature that quickly generated bolts of lightning towards Swallow. He had to dodge continuously while the stone on his necklace suddenly started to glow. That giant thing kept coming for him. Suddenly it accelerated with fierce intensity. The sky was filled with pink light flying everywhere. Melge also found the situation disadvantageous. Oh man, there are too many of them. She quickly used her power, intending to control them. Melge's force attacked the undead, and suddenly a white light flashed the pink light created by Melge. It began to spread further and further. Melge watched them burning in her pink light. If they kept coming like this, there was probably no other choice but to keep moving and dodging. She looked up. The barrier covering the sky was high-level court magic. She recalled what Swallow had said, as expected from Lord Deva R. Swallow's gesture of patting her head flashed through her mind. I'm going to go talk to Eros for a bit. It hadn't even been 3 minutes since he said that yet. So much had already happened. Heavy, ragged breathing echoed behind Melge, forcing her to turn around. A tall man with pink hair clutching a wound at his waist was walking slowly toward the mage. Everyone? Are they safe? Melge pointed toward the masterpiece she had created. If you're talking about the others, they're burning in there. The man looked at her blankly. Mage, are you a comrade of the knights? Melge was quite curious to hear him say that. Knights. He explained so she would understand, the one wearing the super-huge giant armor and the one in black robes who looks like a beggar. Ah, you mean the Wanderer. Now Melge understood what he was saying. She repeated his words. Comrades? How could that be? Melge continued. I'm just a servant. How could I ever compare to their greatness? His eyes narrowed further. Is that so? The man thought for a moment. If she knew those knights, she would surely be with them. Thank heaven, Rosalina, you've done it, at least. They didn't have to die in vain. The man seemed to be in quite a lot of pain. Unable to stand, he collapsed to his knees. Hastin, she will be saved! The man's body was covered in blood. Mage, I'm going to turn into one of the undead soon. Melge seemed to realize it too. I know. Hearing that, he mustered his strength one last time. I know I don't deserve it, but could I ask you for one favor? His face became incredibly pathetic. So she wasn't human? The man looked at Melge with eyes that looked terrified, or perhaps it didn't matter anymore. He didn't look up at Melge again. If there's any weapon around here. Could you get it for me? Melge just glanced at him without saying a word. He sat there helpless, but a spear was thrust right in front of him, leaving him bewildered. Melge gave him a compliment. You really are a warrior. He grabbed the spear that Melge had offered. Over here. Swallow was facing the undead, constantly trying to attack him. Swallow, with sharp spikes on his back, radiated bloodlust. His face was stern, revealing terrifying teeth. In Erebos's eyes, it was as if he realized something. Finally, he looked ahead. I will kill that ancient monster. His thoughts were full of malice to fill this entire land with the undead. Erebos, with a great burning desire, wanted to become a transcendental entity that ruled over death. The arrows he fired at the ancient monster Erebos suddenly roared, You should feel lucky to die by my hands after wandering aimlessly for thousands of years. Those arrows were flying toward Swallow's back. A terrifying yellow light flared, and suddenly a source of white light caused everything nearby to explode with such force that even the incoming arrows detonated. Erebos witnessed that scene. He roared in desperation. It hurts! It hurts so much that I can't let you fight anymore! Swallow, meanwhile, clearly heard his intent. Let me hit you. Don't tell me. A massive source of power was approaching so great that the trees nearby were shaking with every surge. The undead standing nearby didn't understand what was happening to their master. Erebos used his own power to move the tidal waves. Swallow was quite puzzled. Huh. Why is he taking his anger out on the trees all of a sudden? Whatever, it doesn't matter. Is that really the strongest magic you've got? Swallow mocked the giant blocks in the air. Nothing more powerful than that. Erebos felt quite unsettled hearing that. Could it be he only let me attack him just to test the strength of god-tier magic? Erebos finally realized the reality of the situation. I can't beat him. I have to retreat. He regretted his actions instantly. I was too rash. Erebos made everything explode, hoping to create some space to run, but Swallow wouldn't grant him that wish, quickly stepping forward. I'm talking to you, Erebos, Swallow said, looking his way. Don't get any funny ideas. Erebos glared at Swallow, his eyes filled with resentment. But that didn't make Swallow feel intimidated. Go ahead, use some stronger magic if you have it. Receiving no answer, Swallow had to push again. Why so quiet? Swallow's frustration began to mount. Does that mean you have no other powerful spells, then? It was hard to tell what Erebos was feeling, but black ribbons began to coil around his body. Another massive explosion occurred, but it didn't seem to go as planned, and Swallow let out a long sigh. The explosions just kept happening, sending black fragments fluttering everywhere. As the source of power continued to assault Swallow, he muttered, "Why do you all act like you're reading from the same script?" The battle raged on before the zombies. A massive surge of power pierced through the zombies, surging back towards Swallow, completely enveloping him. A giant chain bound Swallow tight, catching him by surprise. In a split second, Erebos transformed into a skeleton. Swallow grumbled, "I really hate this kind of spell." Included in the line above. Suddenly, the light in Erebos' eyes flared much brighter. He transformed into a massive, slimy form. Watching this, Swallow couldn't help but admire it. Is that another god-tier spell? Included in the line above. Why does this look so defensively tough? Suddenly, the chains on Swallow shifted and the slimy mass of Erebos attacked him. Oh, so gross. Swallow kept complaining, "Geez, this is so annoying." He looked at the creature, watching it keep churning out slime at that size. Guess I have to get serious now. Swallow's gaze turned dangerous. Suddenly, Erebos blasted a direct beam of blue light from his eyes downwards. That light created a white explosion right on Swallow. The light was blinding across the whole area. Swallow looked furious now. Erebos stared at the scene, confused as to what just happened as his own body lay sprawled out with the other zombies. Suddenly, Swallow slowly stood up. Watching all of this, Erebos stood frozen as Swallow calmly faced him. It's time to replace one of the 7 forbidden prisons. In another shattered building, Rosalina looked back terrified. What are you thinking, boss? The young girl continued to watch, wondering just how excited he really was. Don't forget that he's a walking disaster, Lialu replied. Or maybe he just doesn't realize it. And he's still the boss, Rosalina retorted. But wouldn't it be better if the boss was a little less impulsive? That guy doesn't seem like he can fight him anymore. Lialu sighed wearily. I'm sure later on. The boss is going to ask me to clean up the mess again, just watch. She grew increasingly tired as she spoke. Should I just write my resignation letter now? Eros, that damn skeleton, what a pain. Oh wait, I'm a skeleton too. Having said that, Lialu clutched her own body in despair and looked outside. What is happening out there? Rosalina saw it too. At that moment, Patrick yelled out helpless, "The boss is causing a scene again." You mean he's taking such good care of the zombie army? Lialu realized. Does that mean now? Will Haston be saved? Patrick asked, stuttering. I mean, is that what you mean? 3-chime sound effect answered her. Don't worry, everything will be fine. So she shouldn't worry too much. But Lialu couldn't seem to shake her own anxiety, so she had to add, and can you talk normally, please? You're giving me goosebumps. Luckily, there didn't seem to be any zombies left in the village. Looking at the village, now covered in pink, Patrick blurted out, truly the Demon King Mior. Nobody else noticed Mior grimacing. So tired? Patrick saw her too and told everyone. She arrived just in time. Mior was already sprawled out on the ground. I finished everything I needed to do. It's been a long time since I used this much magical power. 3 chimes looked at her eyes, welling up with tears. You've worked so hard, Lady Mior. If it weren't for you, who knows what would have happened? Mior didn't take the credit for herself. Didn't Lord Devar already take care of most of the work there, but he still wanted to praise her. No, you did it better. Mior then remembered. What about Swallow? Is he still not done with that guy? Patrick chimed in. As you can see, the boss is still busy dealing with him. That kind of power? It's a truly magnificent sight to behold. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the battle between Swallow and Erebos as Patrick continued. And frankly, it's even more impressive when you think about how catastrophic the aftermath will be. He thought about the gloomy village, and there was the undeniable fact that every time he went out to settle things, he ends up causing even more trouble than he fixes. Rosalina stood there stunned. Patrick, right behind the young girl, kept muttering, I'm sure I'm going to have a mountain of work to do in this village after this is all over. He held his head in distress. All the boss had to do was crush them, right? Why does he always have to drag the fight out like this? It's obvious he doesn't care about me at all, making me tag along and clean up the mess he leaves behind. Rosalina rushed over to comfort him. Wait, is that really what Patrick said? Rosalina replied, turning around. Yes? She looked toward Patrick, who continued, The Lord is the only one we promised to keep alive, so I should probably clear everything else out of here to avoid any future headaches. Patrick didn't strike immediately. He rested his sword on his shoulder and said nonchalantly, Aside from the Lord keeping the others alive doesn't really serve any purpose, does it? Rosalina heard his words and collapsed to the ground in terror. Eterna stood frozen, then quickly interjected, Wait, Lord Patrick, she is one of my subjects too. Patrick fell silent for a moment. His silence made the atmosphere incredibly tense. Suddenly his expression shifted to a bright, friendly one. Of course, he said warmly. There's no reason to kill a little girl like her. He looked down at Rosalina's pathetic state, thinking to himself, She can't do much on her own now that all those scavengers from the dark alley are dead anyway. Patrick looked into the girl's vacant eyes. More importantly, since her mind is already in this state, there's no need to lift a finger. The air between the three grew heavy and silent again. Patrick watched Rosalina's every move without saying a word. If I kill her, it will affect the lord of this place. He turned to look at Eterna, thinking, and we would lose more than we'd gain. Forget it. Let's just consider this side of things taken care of. Patrick turned his head to call out to Malie, who was lying behind them. Miss Malie. When she heard him call, she glanced over and replied. Patrick carefully chose his words. Can you put someone to sleep? Malie sat up and asked, Obviously that's easy enough. But who are you talking about? He didn't answer directly, hinting, I need to have a private word with the Lord. She let out a sound of realization. Malie cast a spell on Rosalina with a single command. Sleep, kid. The girl was startled and let out a cry when the spell hit her unexpectedly. Once Rosalina had slumped over, Patrick said, All right, let's get started then. He knelt on one knee in front of Malie and began to speak. As you can see, we've fulfilled our end of the deal and saved Haston, so you need to keep your promise as well. She hesitated, asking, What do I need to do? Patrick used his coldest tone to state his proposal. You are not allowed to reveal anything you have seen. I believe you know this even if I don't spell it out for you. Eterna's face went pale and cold sweat poured down. The fear on her face did not diminish in the slightest as she listened to him. Now I'm going to tell you a story, so listen carefully. This is a story about a brave lord who endured all sorts of humiliation to protect her territory. The lord realized that the undead would take over her lands, so she was determined to defend the territory alongside her subjects. But ironically, she had to endure the surveillance of the undead, and the territory didn't have enough warriors. Her only choice was to ask for help, but before the aid arrived, the people in the territory began to get angry and insult her. Blaming the Lord while waiting for reinforcements, many citizens died at the hands of the undead. The Lord had no choice but to stay, steadfast in her resolve. After a long wait, reinforcements from the Empire arrived, drove off the undead, and saved the territory. What a truly wonderful story. Patrick finished the story and clapped his hands, causing Eterna to snap out of her daze. You are not a cowardly lord who only knows how to run away. He spread his arms wide, his tongue nimble as he tried to manipulate her. You are a lord who sacrificed herself to save the people of her territory. Eterna guessed, Are you telling me I have to deceive my own people? Patrick didn't answer directly, pointing behind her. Behind Eterna lay her own territory filled with thick smoke and dust. His meaningful, profound question echoed, Didn't you say you wanted to live? Eterna bit her lip, hesitating as she thought. He calmly, unhurriedly ordered her, Go distribute the food in the castle to save those who are still alive. Aid from other cities will arrive here soon. Eterna looked up in surprise and asked, "How can you be sure that aid will come?" Patrick patiently explained, "It's not that I know for sure, but rather I will make it a reality, because we will take on the task of turning the young Lord of Hastin into a hero." Unease was clearly visible on Eterna's face. Patrick stopped talking to her and quickly changed the subject. "If it's this quiet, the boss must have finished everything." He suggested to Malie, "We should head to the boss now. Miss Malie, if you could teleport us, that would be great." She chirped, answering honestly, "I'm completely out of mana. Looks like teleportation magic is off the table," Barrack said, sounding frustrated, and stopped talking. Suddenly, Athenor hesitated and asked, Can I ask you something?" The two turned to look at her. Hearing her next question, they were stunned for a moment. Why would he go to such lengths just to save, Athenor wondered to herself. They were dungeon monsters. There was no way they would ever save a human without wanting something in return. Barrack sighed softly, casting a cold, warning glare at her. "Didn't you say you wanted to survive? Then know your place. Don't go trying to dig into things you don't need to." At the same time, deep in the dungeon, Qualu's voice echoed, "Well, it's about time we replaced one of the 7 disaster dungeons." He looked up and said, "I actually feel sorry for you." Qualu's tentacles held Everett tight. He stood there casually chatting with him. "If you had just kept your mouth shut, you could have avoided all of this." "Don't you think—" Qualau scratched his beard, sounding bored. "Man, why can't one person after another just let me be? Ugh! I've been stabbed so many times my back is actually itching." Everett stared at him for a moment before speaking. "Ancient monster, I am once again struck by your power." Qualu continued scratching his back and replied wearily, "Forget it, I couldn't care less." He turned the question back to him. "Let me ask you one thing. Why Hastin of all places?" Everett remained silent, listening to Qualu. "If you hadn't attacked this place, I wouldn't have had to come here, would I?" Pretending not to understand his point, the monster replied calmly, "Hastin is the most strategic location to invade the Empire." Qualu cut him off. "No, that's not what I'm talking about." He smirked coldly, thinking, so that's how it is. That means this guy knew this was my territory and still came anyway. Avort suddenly countered with a mocking question, "What do you think the reason is?" As he finished speaking, a terrifying surge of power erupted. Qualu's eyes began to glow with the golden, murderous light. The tentacles pierced through his body. He squinted as he looked up. A faint laugh escaped Everett, followed by a series of insane, eerie cackles that filled the air. Qualu's tentacles, having pierced through him, were building up mana. He detonated Everett into a mess of gore without a shred of pity. His head fell from the explosion and landed right in front of Qualu. He asked, surprised, "Huh? What's this?" So he wasn't planning to use teleportation magic then. Qualu picked up the monster's head, no longer interested. Whatever. Doesn't matter. He was going to die anyway. He threw the head over his shoulder and turned back to assess the situation. "Let's see here." Qualu stood in the middle of the dungeon, which was now devoid of life, and let out a few involuntary cries. He gritted his teeth, looking around in confusion. The night sky above was beautiful. His voice, tinged with helplessness, echoed, "What am I supposed to do now? If this place isn't repaired, it won't be usable anymore." Suddenly, behind Qualu, the familiar voice of Barish rang out, "Boss!" He and Melly were running toward him. Barish continued using that sweet, familiar tone. Boss Qualu was so terrified that cold sweat broke out all over his face. Barrack's voice got closer and closer. "Boss." He arrived with a face full of killing intent, his tone faked to the point of being terrifying. "Stay right there. Don't you move. I'm coming to find you. I missed you so much. You missed me too, right?" Qualu was so scared he couldn't even budge. The head slipped from his hand. Qualu's voice, filled with utter despair, whispered, "I am so done for."